Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to episode 12 of Rock and Roll Religion, where we are talking about a big topic today. One of the most legendary and argued about bands of all time, mostly due to their later output. But we are talking about the classical period of the first 5 albums of the absolute legend that is Metallica. And here to help me do that, I got a whole bunch of really great characters to help me do that. So first up, welcome back, one of my previous co-hosts and a expert on the more extreme metals that there are. Welcome back, Imperitus. How's it going, man?
How many times do I have to tell you to stop calling me a damn expert?
You are, though. You're like an encyclopedia with this shit.
I am not. But thanks for having me back. It's always great being on here. Always great talking metal with people, talking music in general.
Absolutely. And also welcome back to the channel to the person whose idea this stream was, and really glad to have her back on the channel. Welcome back to the lovely and talented Amber Andromeda. How's it going?
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming up with the idea for this.
No worries. It had to be done.
Oh, absolutely. But I probably would have put this off a lot longer than normal. And for our first on this channel, welcome to SgtHerbs.
Hey,
how's it going,
what's
buddy?
Doing good. Thank you for the invite. Big shout out to you,
absolutely,
Amber and Pope, for bringing me on. Glad to be here.
Hang on. Brett Day saying there's something wrong with my mic. Let's see if I can knock the gain up a little bit. See if that's a little better. All right. But I actually have graphics for this one for once. And let's get into the first record. This one, me and Imperitus had mentioned before that a previous band we talked about, Venom, was a heavy influence on these guys. But Kill 'Em All is right where that influence is most evident. Where this is just raw, just very aggressive metal from 1983, and it's still up there for records for me.
I didn't hear what you just said. Sorry.
Is my mic cutting out?
It's probably me. It's probably me and my internet, so don't worry.
But no, I mean, this record is probably the rawest and most aggressive that they've done.
Yeah. Yes, I agree.
And still, some of the stuff on this record, even though it was their first attempt, still ranks among their best, in my opinion. Songs like the Four Horsemen or Phantom Lord, are still amazing tracks.
I agree. Four Horsemen is one of my favorites off of Kill 'Em All. It's just like peak thrash. I love it.
Yeah, that and No Remorse are my two favorite.
No Remorse is great. The one me and SgtHerbs were just talking about was Anesthesia.
Yeah, Anesthesia. Yep.
It's just that raw bass line is just
extremely
man, it's just like SgtHerbs thought it was freaking Kirk Hammett. It's like no, that's Cliff with the bass.
It's my deaf ass. I couldn't hear that like bass solo take one. I just heard the take one part. And it's like it's been so many years I've listened to that track. I'm like, oh shit, Pope, I didn't know that.
I feel like I mean, Pope, we sort of spoke about bass appreciation on the Ghost stream. I feel like Metallica lacks in that department of like in general, like
early albums less so. I think with Cliff they had been together for long enough that they really trusted him with the bass, and there are some really great bass tracks in some of their albums, like Orion and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but I think once Jason came into the band, I don't think they ever trusted him enough to really.
They did because when I saw him live, and this was back, I want to say 93. They played Anesthesia, but it was Jason doing it.
Okay, so I think maybe
because he's definitely capable of pulling that off.
Oh yeah, I mean he's absolutely capable. It was just I think they never really warmed up to him because he was Cliff's replacement.
Not in the same way. And I remember reading somewhere they had recruited Cliff out of another band from a show that they went to, right?
I think so, yeah.
And what it was I was reading, they were so impressed with the way that Cliff played bass and how he used a wah pedal with the bass as well, which you can hear a bit of that on Kill 'Em All. I mean, in Kill 'Em All, you definitely hear they experimented more with their sounds as far as like using pedals, because there's that other song they have where they're using a fuzz pedal, it sounds like.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly if it's a fuzz pedal, but that's just what it struck me as a sound. I'm like, it's almost like they were listening to Jimi Hendrix and they were like, how can we make this metal?
Well, I mean,
But
they were
yeah.
I know for a fact they were listening to a lot of Venom and a lot of Motorhead.
Yeah.
In fact, that's how they all found each other, really, is they were all Motorhead fans and
Yeah.
got together. And I just want to stop for a second and, appreciate that at some point we could have had a band that had the guitarist as James Hetfield and Dave Mustaine, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we would have never gotten Megadeth. So,
Yeah.
What would have happened with Testament? Because that's where Kirk Hammett started.
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Testament's
dude,
great.
Testament with Kirk Hammett would have been interesting.
Oh yeah. It would have been way different though if Kirk Hammett stuck with Testament. Like that would have changed their sound. Like, cause they've got the singing thrash sound and death metal sound, but definitely feel like Kirk Hammett would have been a much different sound if he stayed with Testament.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, and even on this record, a lot of times, like Kirk's solos kind of feel like very, and it's something that they always do, and his solos feel very abrupt. Like there's no like lead in into it. It's almost like it sounds like somebody just threw him his guitar and went play.
Yeah.
And that's not to say he's not brilliant. He is, but he was, Sentinel saying
Exodus,
he was in
that's
Exodus.
Right.
That would have been really interesting.
That's true. He was an Exodus.
It was Testament when they were still called the Legacy, though.
Maybe.
I could have sworn.
I mean, but it's like that whole scene, like the early thrash metal scene in the Bay Area, like they were all just kind of riffing off of each other and playing with each other and all that.
Yeah.
So like it's awesome how, and kind of odd how insular the freaking metal scene is. Where just like everybody's playing with everybody else and touring with people and just like we said with the black metal streams, everybody's in like 6 different bands with somebody from this band.
And I was wrong. It was Exodus, which he did for.
Oh, okay. You're absolutely right with this one, and he does have a much more clean sound to him than a lot of American guitarists do. Which is a lot more European inspired, but like his solos do sound very abrupt. Like, but I really love James's guitar work, and I don't think he gets enough credit for these early records. Like I've like listened to it, and his picking accuracy is absolutely stupid on these records. It's something like 97% of just like every note he played, he wanted to. Hey, Arkasil, how's it going, man? But it's like James is playing on this one, and half of it's all downstrokes too, which just means he just has that absolute right hand of doom.
Insane. Yeah.
Just that hand speed is just ridiculous.
Yeah. I remember thinking that we have James Hetfield. I'm getting like spaced out on the names now, but fucking the main guy with Metallica, like his downstroke picking is just insanely good. And all my years of playing, I've never been able to get that accurate. But then when I tried to play shit like Slayer, Raining Blood, and I'm like, dude, this is insanely fast with the alternate picking. I can't even fucking keep up with this.
Yeah, Kerry King has a hell of a right hand too.
Oh yeah, but for sure, James Hetfield, he's probably still in my mind like the best at the downstroke picking, where it's like you're only hitting in that downward motion. That's just like, I haven't seen anybody else really be able to measure up to him in that way. Yeah, greatest heavy metal rhythm guitar player of all time.
and like, it's one of those unsung hero kind of categories. Like, you need a rhythm guitar if you're not using your bass as your rhythm, like Motorhead does.
Yeah, agree.
But you need a rhythm guitar, and yet nobody ever pays attention to it.
Yeah, no one talks about it. Yeah.
It's, as much as your drums and bass are the foundation of the song and what drives the direction of your song, the rhythm guitarist is right there with the bass, and it's super important. Definitely, people always pay attention to like the singing or the lead guitar, but you wouldn't be able to have great singing or great lead guitar without those foundations of the rhythm.
And I think this is what makes Metallica so perfect in these early years, is that they had all of it. This was back when Lars could still drum halfway decently, and wasn't a complete dick.
No, he's still a complete dick even back then.
yeah, that's fair. But you had Cliff on the bass, who is possibly one of the best metal bassists of all time. I'd put him up there with Lemmy and Steve Harris.
Yep.
And especially some of the more complicated stuff he was doing with bass in the background that you barely even heard.
Yeah.
Was absolutely great. And he was sorely missed when he died. But and then James and Kirk on the guitars, I would put them in a category right up there with KK Downing and Glenn Tipton, or Dave Murray and Adrian Smith, in terms of a guitar duo in a metal band. And it's just, they were a lot more aggressive and a lot darker than those guys would get. That's true. That's true too, Sentinel. He was only 24 when he died, so this dude was still improving.
Yeah, it was one of the biggest tragedies, definitely.
Either that or the death of Randy Rhoads that soon after. That after he started with Ozzy.
My heart.
That man was an absolute freaking beast.
Oh yeah. Getting the solo down for Crazy Train is still one of my goals.
Oh god, that's just it's like trying to play some of Viv Campbell solos from Dio. It's just yikes. The amazing thing with Viv Campbell too is he did that all in one take. Like, he would not pre-record it. He wouldn't write it down beforehand either. He just went with how he was feeling at the song.
Yep.
And he just laid it down like that, and they're still some of the most legendary solos of all time.
Yeah. I think that's one of the great things about metal back in the 80s, before you have all this digitized recording stuff that exists now, where everything can be very on the beat with the metronome and very computerized, because you can cut and edit it like that. These people were doing it like raw,
like these days you can straight up play with a metronome and then edit out the metronome sound on recording.
Yep. And doing it on the spot.
That's absolutely the case. I'd add Alexi Lyle in there too.
But, it's funny how many different genres of metal Cliff's bass playing is influenced. I mean, you can hear a major Cliff Burton influence from Alex Webster of Cannibal Corpse.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
Probably one of the very few death metal bassists to not use a pick.
Yeah. And Metallica in general just influenced pretty much everybody who came after.
Yeah. They had the elements of with Kill 'Em All specifically, the like underground hardcore punk scene, which those drums was pretty much like thrash and punk sound almost the same. Almost. There's slight differences, but
especially like Anthrax coming out of New York.
Yeah,
they had a very, very heavy punk and hip hop influence on some of their stuff, especially the later ones.
Yep.
Well, that was something I brought up on 70s prog rock stream on Monday. It's kind of funny how different sounds within the same genre came from different regions.
Oh yeah,
you get a lot of the trad metal, the new wave of British heavy metal out of the UK. Scandinavia gave us the second wave of black metal. The West Coast of the States, you have the Bay Area thrash scene. You have the East Coast hardcore / thrash scene, and then death metal came out of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Still trying to figure that one out, but hey,
the Sunshine State.
But then again, a lot of the two of the bigger death metal bands came out of New York.
Yeah,
Cannibal Corpse and Deicide both started in Buffalo.
Yep.
I could picture being angry enough to play some death metal living up in Buffalo in the winter.
Yeah.
Cold and dreary. It just lends perfect to that sound.
Feet of snow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't want to go anywhere because you're going to have to shovel.
Yeah. Man.
Yeah, I could easily picture guys in their late teens, early 20s just sitting in their freaking garage going, fuck this place, fuck this weather, fuck this snow.
Yeah. 100% agree.
Oh man, but this album, I think they were really setting up for something. They just hadn't quite found what would become traditional Metallica later on yet. This was a lot more aggressive and a lot rougher.
Yeah.
But I'm actually, like, the more and more I listen to it, the more I appreciate this record, and the more it's kind of shot up my rankings of their albums. Like, I used to think this was their weakest of their first albums, but
yeah, I was kind of like that as well. And like, it's just going way back, but like, I'd only really listened to like Seek and Destroy. It was like later on.
That's a popular track, but I think it's the weakest one on the freaking
I think
album.
it might be the weakest on this record.
Yeah.
And when that's the weakest on this album, you know it's good.
Well, especially when you have Four Horsemen and like Imperitus was saying No Remorse, which is your other favorite. Like Seek and Destroy, it was almost more like a radio friendly thrash, which I'll throw that term out a little bit because definitely when you compare all of those 88 albums, and you get to the Black Album, which we'll talk about a little bit later, like that it was almost like radio friendly Metallica.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I get that. Yeah.
No, he's right. I listened to the original version and the remaster, and you can almost not notice a difference.
Yeah.
The recording quality, even in '83, was absolutely top notch.
Yeah.
And especially, like, I love how they set the tone for this whole record with Hit the Lights.
Yep.
Where it was just raw, it was aggressive, it was loud. It was basically, this is what we sound like live. You should come see it.
Yeah. You come out swinging, basically.
And that was a very Venom-like track. Like, if you play like something like that and then black metal or Welcome to Hell after, you can definitely hear the sonic influences from that. Especially with that faded in, like, tuning up intro. It was just like, I can tell you guys were listening to a lot of these guys early. And there's famous pictures of James with wearing Venom t-shirts and stuff like that. So clearly they were listening to him.
Yeah. Precursor to Ride the Lightning.
Yeah. They just kind of continued, and that's a good segue right into.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah, I mean, I guess I had the track list up here the whole time, but I'm crap, so I forgot about it. And I just love how young they all look too.
I know.
Well, I mean, but they were like 19.
And the hair.
It's so funny to me.
It wasn't.
Hey, 70s is here. How's it going, man?
It wasn't that Def Leppard like glam rock hair, but they definitely had that like 80s metal hair for sure.
Oh God, yes.
Love it.
And I love how James is rocking the battle jacket.
Yep.
It's like, yeah, okay.
Black denim jacket. That's the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
That's just me, though.
And Lars just looking like someone just ate his fucking hot dog. Just like,
I think he's the most pissed off looking one.
Right? And then we have probably my favorite out of the four, Ride the Lightning.
Same. Yeah. So when so it's like maybe 14 or 15, and my best friend at the time in high school, which I actually met going to church, and like we went to the same high school as well, just happened to meet him at a fucking church. He introduced me to all these like 70s and 80s bands. I'd never listened to Metallica before, being like super strict Christian family and everything. He's like, okay, we got to listen to each of these albums one after the other. And I felt the same way, like Trey said, like Kill 'Em All is great. It's like a precursor into Ride the Lightning, where they start defining that thrash sound more.
And the first track, actually, let me put that up before I forget.
Fight
Fire with Fire almost sounds like Kill 'Em All Part 2.
Yep.
Like it's just continuing that very aggressive, very punk heavy sound.
Yep.
And then they kind of get more melodic as this record goes on.
You're right. It's as if they started building up that complexity, and then when they get to For Whom the Bell Tolls and Fade to Black, that's where you can start to hear more of that like kind of sound where you start hearing almost like precursor to Master Puppets. It's like they're building that complexity, like they're putting together those thrash metal influences like Venom and Exodus and fucking the death metal sound too. I wouldn't call Metallica death metal band, but they have some of those elements in there just mixed in. It's still very thrash heavy to me. And I know you said Pope, and you're like more in the power metal side of it too, which I was kind of always like a little bit out of. I've always been a thrasher, but yeah.
But no, I mean this record too, like even songs like Fade to Black and For Whom the Bell Tolls, you kind of get almost this Black Sabbath feel out of them.
My two favorites.
They have those doom metal riffs of where it's just epic, freaking long drawn out riffs that are just absolutely freaking crack.
Doom metal would be a better way to put it than death metal. Yeah, you definitely hear that.
Especially For Whom the Bell Tolls with that marching beat to it too.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, that classic trio of Ride the Lightning, For Whom the Bell Tolls, and Fade to Black are worth a purchase, like buying this record just on their own. And that's not even counting songs like freaking Trapped Under Ice and Creeping Death.
Creeping Death. So good. So good.
So as an album, I think this is probably the best they've done.
This is like, so my top three, Master of Puppets, then Ride the Lightning, and the third one, you might be shocked by, the Black Album, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that. And I'm betting Imperitus is going to go on one of his little rants for a minute.
Yeah, probably.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, because he was actually old enough to remember when that album came out, unlike the rest of us.
Yeah, I was a sophomore in high school when that came out.
Oh shit!
That was the same age I was when Saint Anger came out, and the less said about that record, the better.
Yeah, the forgotten album.
Well, it's not forgotten. It's the one we
in my head. In my head,
it's the one we're just like.
And the funny thing too is if you think about it like this, the year the Black Album came out was what, 92?
91, I think.
91, 92. Yeah, bands like Eisenguard were cranking out albums at that point too. First Eisenguard album was like 91, 92. So it's like, we in the States get this crap, but meanwhile in Europe they're putting out like these killer records. Like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah.
But like, no, I mean, this album, like, it's hard to say enough good things about it. Like, everything on this record is just perfection.
It's top tier for me too. Yeah. Kill 'Em All will definitely be like sentimental, like special, because it was like the first Metallica I really heard, and then but following that up with this one, it's just to me it's like perfection for Metallica. Of course, like Master of Puppets was hailed as one of their best albums and like had all the Grammy awards, like went platinum, like what was it, like 20 years, but they hit gold. I think it was like the first or second year after the release, because it was able to sell that much,
which for a metal band is unheard of.
Exactly. Especially in the 80s. Yeah,
especially as a thrash metal band. Like, you could see somebody like Priest or Maiden doing it because they had that kind of draw and that kind of popularity. But these guys at the time, like, thrash was still new and very underground, almost like death metal was in the 90s.
Yeah It's excellent. It's special. It really is.
That might be the most overplayed Metallica song of all time. If Enter Sandman wasn't a thing,
or nothing else matters.
Nothing Else Matters is up there, but one was just like when I was a kid, like that was the only Metallica song you heard on the radio.
Well, at that point in time, that was the only one.
Yep.
No pun intended.
The only one.
No pun. Man, yeah.
And even the album art too, like it's simple, but it's freaking effective.
I really like it.
All of their early
it looks
album
like
art
a movie
really
poster. It reminds me of like a movie poster.
Actually, wasn't it one of the? It was a horror movie in the 90s. It kind of had something.
Yeah,
like this,
it's like
it's
definitely that vibe, and I like it sounds like a weird thing, but I really like how they've done the logo on it as well. It's one of my favorites for sure. Album artwork ever.
The chrome shine, yeah.
And they kept getting better with the album art as they went along, up until the Black Album, where it was just very simplistic.
With just the snake in the side.
Yeah, it was literally getting more complex and more elaborate and stuff like that. And then it was almost like we didn't think of an album for the cover for this one, so just here.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, this was them when I think they had found their sound and were really just running with it at that point.
Yep.
It's like they were experimenting around on a lot of stuff with Kill 'Em All, and then I think this period was going to be like, yes, this is what we should be doing.
Yeah.
And pretty much everyone agreed, because I think pretty much every metalhead I'm aware of owns this record.
Yeah. And if you saw somebody wearing the specific Ride the Lightning shirt, like you knew they were like a real Metallica fan.
Like me.
Yeah. Hey.
But no, because everybody had a Metallica t-shirt of Master of Puppets or even Injustice for a lot. But if you saw someone wearing a Kill 'Em All or Ride the Lightning t-shirt, it's just like, yes, you're an actual Metallica
fan. And not to say that the third and fourth albums are bad. Those are just, I think, the more well-known ones.
They're the ones everyone listened to.
Yeah.
And they're the ones everyone knows. But and then moving into probably the best album art they ever had, Master of Puppets.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that one.
Like this one was just so well done and so perfect for what this record was.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I couldn't find a good enough picture of the back of this, so we don't have the track listing. But this album is one of those like nobody needs to know the track listing. We all know.
Right. So, we were talking a little bit backstage about like the production, right? One of the things that I really love about Master of Puppets is you can tell from Kill 'Em All with that more DIY sound. I know they were signed to a label. I think they were originally like they were trying to go with Metal Blade, but Metal Blade was just starting out in the 80s and didn't have the money to fund their album, so they went with somebody else. And I don't know like what like record labels have been from like each album, but whoever worked with Metallica on the production for this album in particular really knew what they were doing. The guitars sounded better, more clear. The drums were absolutely fantastic in the production with this. Like you can hear them hit heavier, it sounds better. And even with
I just looked it up. This one was actually self-produced.
Okay, self-produced.
This is Blackened Records.
Right. Okay. So yeah, they must have put pretty much like all the money that they had into this. And if they're self-produced, like buying out all the stuff to record it and everything, and probably spent a lot of time with it, because like you can really hear the upgrade from even from Ride to Lightning to this album.
The audio quality is absolutely off the charts in this one.
Yeah, especially for 80s, like you just don't hear that kind of quality in a lot of bands. Like there's still like there are some great albums out of the 80s, but like just talking about metal in particular, like this has some amazing production quality, and I think still stands up to this day. It's just amazing. And like you can hear Cliff a little bit better with this album for sure. And there's like he has those parts where he's doing like melodic lines, or even parts where he has like little bass solos during the transitions and stuff. Like it's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, you can really hear. I think Cliff was a lot more involved in the writing on this one too, because the music's a lot more complex and a lot more a lot proggier than their earlier stuff.
I think
it's probably why it's my favorite.
I think specifically on the title track, Master of Puppets, all four of them did the writing on that one, and you can definitely hear it in that. That's like, it's one of their most complex songs. Yeah, Orion too. Yeah. Orion's awesome.
Orion, I think, was entirely written by Cliff.
Yeah, it's great. Was that that's the second to last like instrumental track, I think.
Yep. And actually, the one on the last one is my favorite out of all of them, and actually might be my favorite song on.
I think it starts and ends perfectly as well. I love hearing that intro to Battery.
Yeah. Where Ride the Lightning had an excellent outro with Creeping Death and Call of Cthulhu. In this album, yeah, I totally agree with you, Amber. It just starts and ends perfectly. The arrangement of the entire album is just top notch.
Oh yeah, I mean, and even in the middle, you have some real just classic tracks like freaking Disposable Heroes, and then all of it is just beautiful.
Yeah,
and like starting the song off with Battery, like it's such a switch too, because you get that like acoustic, almost like Spanish guitar intro, almost flamenco in a way, and then it just goes into that fucking epic riff.
Yeah, and it works so well. Yeah,
it's so good. It's just straight into their thrash sound. I love it.
You can like especially seeing them live. You can hear, like, you could like feel the tension building right before they go into that blast beat and the thrash riff, and then just fucking pits just start going everywhere.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's coming. They're like, yeah.
I love it. Yeah, they had what was that other track that's like really heavy, just like Battery? I'm like blanking out.
Damage Incorporated.
Damage Inc. was
Damage Inc.
Disposable Heroes too in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Those are great.
But Battery is probably the most aggressive they've been since Kill 'Em All.
Yeah, and I'd agree.
There are some on Injustice that kind of come close, but I don't think any of them actually met that standard right up until this moment. But that was one of those like. And Metallica's always been really good at that with the first track, like kind of really setting the tone for the record. And choosing like the perfect intro track too, where Battery kind of like builds up the tension a little bit, like, oh, this could be a little different for them. And it's like, nope, we are
actually no.
It's like you know exactly what's about to happen.
Yeah, gotta love it.
But and then like this entire record was just really, really well done, and there's a reason it's a classic. I think I enjoy Ride the Lightning a little bit more because I think the high points are higher on it, but overall, this album might be their best.
Yeah. I would say as far as arrangement, the songwriting, and the production quality, it's definitely going to take the cake on that. But yeah, I'd agree. Ride the Lightning it has that heavier, like more thrashy, energetic sound to it.
Yeah, I mean, both of them work great, but Load was the better of the two.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I've blanked those memories out of existence.
I've drank those albums out of my mind.
They don't exist in this world.
I don't know if I've even listened to Reload. It was around Black Album. I kind of fell off listening to them and started listening to other bands.
Songs off of both of them, I guarantee.
Yeah, there's some good songs, but the rest is meh.
Like certain songs, like Hero of the Day and stuff like that, are pretty Fuel are pretty decent songs by themselves.
I like Outlaw Torn. That's a good song.
Unforgiven too is probably my favorite of that era, but. That would be, but other than that, those albums were pretty bare, and there was some stuff on there that was just like, dude, no.
Unfortunately,
it's funny that
was still
Load is like they're like 13, 14 track albums, and Master of Puppets is only 8.
Well, that's the thing.
Right.
These songs were 8 to 10 songs per album, and they were far better than when they had 12 to 14.
Yeah.
It's like maybe 8's just like the magic number for them, or like
Maybe.
8 to 10. Less is more.
Well, I mean, I think you see that with modern Iron Maiden in a lot of ways, where I think the longer they go on and the more self-indulgent they get, the worse they are.
Yeah.
Like, especially like with the modern albums. Like, I don't know if any of you've heard Senjutsu, but it's just absolutely no. Just no. It's like it's every track is a 2-minute acoustic intro and then goes into a really boring riff that never builds to anything. But Brightest Day, I have to disagree with you there because the second half of Cygnus X1 by Rush exists. So I can't agree with
that. I don't mind it. I like all of the Unforgivens.
Unforgiven 3 is a little interesting for me, but
I like it. Not as much, but I like it. Yeah.
But I think the original is still probably the best out of the 3. But we'll get to that song in a bit. But Master of Puppets rightfully deserves its place at the in the top tier of Metallica records.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Like, even if you don't like every song on this record, there's something for everybody on here.
Just the title track alone, the tempo changes, the timing changes, the riffing style, the riffing styles, just everything just gets so slammed together.
And the transitions on all of this record, not even just Master of Puppets, are so tight, so well done, and just perfect in every way that it just really just stands out.
I would go so far as to say, even though they're not really like progressive rock, as far as the heavier side goes, it definitely feels like I hear elements of Master of Puppets, like those timing changes, how they put together the riffs and everything, did influence some of the bands that came after.
And I think was influenced by bands like Rush and stuff like that. Me and Imperitus were talking about that with 70s Rock Fan when we did our prog rock episode. And like this is certainly the proggiest they got and might be considered a prog metal album.
Yeah, all things considered, like that's a good point right there.
And especially when they kind of extend that track length out to 6-7 minutes, they're starting to get into like early Dream Theater territory with some of this stuff. And the arrangements are very complex and they're using a lot of different time signatures and shit like that they've never used before. So I think it's, even if you wouldn't consider it prog metal in general, their style, for them, it was certainly a progressive record.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And then, unfortunately, we lost Cliff Burton in 1987. And then I think 6 months after that, they recorded this record right here. And this is actually the first album I ever bought with my own money. And I still have not regretted that purchase to this day.
It's a great album. I love it. I feel like there are parts where you can hear the grief in their writing. Like, just like you said earlier, it seems like they didn't trust their new bassist as much as they did with Cliff.
Yeah, and I think part of that, like you say, the grief and stuff like that, they were pissed off at the fucking world on this record. And I think that feeds into that sound. Like, you can hear that snarl in James's voice, too.
Definitely. It's hard to say if this is where he like really started getting heavy into his drinking, or if that had just always been an issue. But I almost kind of feel like him being more pissed off, he probably started drinking a lot more. It's like, yeah, you read about how pissed off with the way they were, like at how Cliff died. Like the bus driver just didn't give a shit, or seemed like he didn't give a shit. It's like, yeah, it's hard not to be pissed off that your best friend died that way, you know?
Yeah, and like it's especially it's one of those moments too where you're just like, nobody saw it coming, where it wasn't like, he had a massive drug problem and OD'd one day or something like that. Not that that's any better when you're 24 years old, but in such a weird accident like that, it's just like,
I agree.
It's so sudden and so surprising that it's just like, holy shit! Like all you can do is just be mad at the universe for taking your friend away.
Yeah, agreed.
So young. They were just getting started as well. It's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, they were really starting to find their stride. I was like, it's a tragedy. It really is.
I don't recall if this is when they were on tour opening for Ozzy or right after. And
I think it was when, because I know they were on the tour bus when that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sentinel's pretty right. Lars hit a new level on Dyer's Eve, I think. But because that drum track is actually quite good. But yeah, that tour, that accident, I think took a lot of the wind out of them, and they had this. Unfortunately, when you're this early in your career and you're still trying to build an audience and trying to grind your way up to the top,
yeah,
you have to keep soldiering on and have to keep doing it. So they just had to go out and get another bassist, and I don't think any one of them ever opened up to him.
Yeah,
especially in interviews I've seen. Everyone I've seen later, like, yeah, I mean, let's face it. This is 6 months after Cliff died, and you're all of a sudden you're here.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
God.
I don't. You see it a lot with vets when we get either have someone heavily injured or killed, and we get a replacement. Nobody wants to talk to them. Nobody wants to learn their name. Like, because you're replacing my friend.
Yeah, I've had a couple of jobs like that where they didn't get to know new people because the turnover rate was so high.
Yeah, until you'd been there for like a month, nobody even remember your name because you probably weren't going to be here.
Right.
Yeah. Customer service jobs, exactly like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of production jobs like that too. But yeah, but this whole track list, and they're all long too. Every song on this record is over 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And some of them stretch to like, and Justice for All is almost 10 minutes. But that's arguably one of the better ones.
And Justice for All, yeah.
Although I will say Live Blackened is freaking amazing.
Yes, it is.
And again, they start off really aggressive and then kind of go more melodic with the second one. So it kind of follows the same pattern Master of Puppets does, where they kind of go in and out of that. You'll have like one really aggressive and then two kind of more melodic, and then you'll get another really freaking heavy one.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at it, one, which is probably the most melodic and kind of mellow their sounds ever gotten on to this point anyway. Then you have songs like The Shortest Straw and Harvester of Sorrow.
Yeah,
which is some of the heaviest, most doomy tracks they have.
Yeah. When I was listening to it earlier, and I started thinking about how this was such a short time after Cliff had passed, and you look at the song titles, even just looking at them, it's like you can tell like they're pissed off, but also at the same time like likely really sad about that shit happening. It's like, and then I go and listen to like To Live Is to Die, and I'm like, fucking James has got to be pissed off at everything, and you probably don't even want to be around him.
That's probably my favorite music or instrumental from these guys.
Yeah,
it's such a really cool song, and then you have that epic crescendo in the middle that is the solo, and they all just go the hell off.
Yeah. It's great. I remember listening to that and thinking it was like, I wonder if they had listened to Pink Floyd and then went, what if Pink Floyd tried metal? But I mean, I'm kind of a Pink Floyd fan, so I was like, I couldn't help but hear that.
I can hear it though.
Mm.
I can hear what you're saying there. Like, I can hear the influence, and this was not all that long after The Wall came out.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't even think about that. I just remember thinking, I was like, man, this track kind of reminds me of like Pink Floyd, but heavy metal.
And you can kind of hear some of the same melodic elements of parts of The Wall in here.
Mm.
It's an odd connection to make, but it's there. But because you wouldn't find two bands that are much more different than Metallica and Pink Floyd in most ways.
True, yeah.
But they're both quite good, and I mean, the 80s was just a different time for music, man. Like, everything was awesome.
Yeah, everything.
Like, even outside of the metal genre, you had, some of the pop and mainstream rock stuff was just at its peak. Like, you had guys like, Michael Jackson or Van Halen and stuff like that, all right around this time, just coming out with some of the classic content.
Yeah, Van Halen, definitely. One of the things that I thought was interesting listening to this album more, their production. I don't know if they use less production on this album, but it definitely sounded more raw compared to like Master of Puppets.
It does, yeah.
You can
Space
hear.
Zombie, that's why we do this show.
Yep.
Is to give you guys more stuff to bang your head to.
All of these are great albums. Maybe not so much the Black Album, but that's my personal opinion.
That's true as well, Trey. Is that contemporary for I think Master of Puppets was Appetite for Destruction.
Okay.
The only good Guns N' Roses record.
Yeah.
Also, yes.
Trey might not like that. I know he's a huge Guns N' Roses fan. But yeah. No, yeah, you mentioned it was like this album had come out so shortly. What was it, like 6 months after Cliff had passed?
Yeah, something
they
like
that. They probably rushed through this album thinking about it. That would explain why it's. Go ahead.
I was gonna say they probably had a lot of it recorded, or not recorded, but written.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can still hear a lot of Cliff's influence on this record, which unfortunately I think is why their sound changed so much at this point. I think they had lost Cliff, who had that more aggressive, more thrash metal style, and a lot of the jazz elements too kind of went away at this point. Like a lot of the odd time signatures and stuff like that started disappearing.
It got way more simple after this album. That's what I felt like. It was like one of the reasons why I fell off with Black is just not as complex.
Yeah, they did kind of strip down their sound for the Black album, and I feel like half the community like actually appreciates that more because they're into the more simple, punky, like hard rock stuff, and the other half really hates it because they were really starting to enjoy the more complex, progressive side of thrash metal.
Mm-hmm.
And it was certainly pointing the way for that because other bands kept going in that direction, like Megadeth with Rust in Peace, just 2 years after this.
Yeah,
it's very jazzy, very progressive in terms of they're just changing chime signatures constantly. There's guitar solos all over the shop. I mean, I think Hangar 18 alone has 4 of them. And you really get that was where thrash metal was going in a lot of ways. Testament too with a lot of their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And probably Exodus and Overkill as well, because they kind of got a lot more complicated during this time. But it's hard to tell with them because they were just starting out, so they didn't really have a sound yet. And I really think that this is like, the last album that everybody can kind of point to and go, yes, this was good Metallica.
Yeah.
And as Soul Assassin says, incorrectly, one does not simply say Slayer.
I agree.
Fucking Slayer!
Hell yeah. Love that band.
It is heresy to just simply speak the name. It must be said correctly. But no, I mean this record I think is the last one. There's usually a record in bands' careers that like all of the fans can point to and go, yes.
Yep.
I don't disagree I don't completely disagree as a lover of the Black Album. I just I really like the Black Album for other reasons, I think.
Yeah.
I get why people don't like it, like for what you've just been talking about, and like especially with like this, well, we'll talk about it, I guess, in a minute, but like the second half, I know what people are saying with like that it's more simple. and I would get why that would put people off. I just happen to really like all the songs on this album, but the first half of it is, the better half, in my opinion.
I don't disagree with you that it's musically the better half. Unfortunately, it's the two songs I really don't want to listen to pretty much at all because they've been so overplayed that I just never want to hear them again.
Yeah. I kind of hit that boat with like you were saying, Enter Sandman or One are like the most overplayed radio songs.
Yeah.
And I know One, okay, yeah, it was a different album, but still most overplayed. Sad but True, that's the other one they play all the
I
time on the
do
radio.
really.
I like that song though. Sad but True is
that has a really good rhythm to it. And a really
I love
interesting
Wherever
mindset.
I May Roam is probably my favorite. It's one of my favorites. I just love that it's got that Phrygian mode in the guitar, which I really love. I'm always a sucker for that. I just really like the song. I get why people don't like this album as much, but yeah, I do really enjoy the music.
my first guitar teacher was like really into Metallica and loved this album, and so, it got me into it. And this was, I'd say, like where out of all the like early albums, like kind of where I stopped listening to Metallica, because like the newer ones it was like not so much into. But kind of what I was telling Pope earlier, because you hear a lot of this stuff on here on the radio a lot, and it's pretty much like all the way through Don't Tread on Me, and you hear that on the radio too. It's more radio friendly. Like you'll hear Master of Puppets, but definitely not as much as you would hear One or Enter Sandman. And yeah, I mean, I maybe part of it because they had kind of like stripped down their sound a little bit. I think it's like what you were saying, because of losing Cliff, losing that jazz influence, losing the tempo changes that he would want to put into songs, like those melodic bass lines that he would want to put in, and more straightforward, I think is really what lends it to being a little bit more radio friendly. But yeah, definitely those two songs, Enter Sandman, you hear that so much on the radio.
You do. I will admit that. Yes.
Nothing else matters as well, but that song is at least quite good. And like I really enjoyed the build that song has. Like, because that's the thing I can't stand about a lot of, like, the later Metallica songs. It's just kind of flat and then doesn't really build.
Yeah, this may have been where they really fell off. I wouldn't say they lost it entirely, but this album may be like where they kind of fell off with that like complexity, that like build up.
There were still traces of it on parts of this record, but yeah, it was a lot more stripped down, and a lot simpler. But you did have some interesting points. The Unforgiven had some really interesting riffs and stuff like that in it. The God That Failed, I actually like quite a bit.
I do like. I mean, obviously I do, but yeah. I don't know, I think you were saying they don't have as much of a complexity on some of the tracks. I think that I think for me, after this album is where they fall off. But I think this one, they still have some of it there, but yeah, not quite. But I think they still made it work on this album. That's just my personal preference. I just happen to like all the songs on this album. But yeah, I know, like Enter Sandman, obviously, like I could probably run through the album without listening to Enter Sandman.
I still love the intro to The God That Failed, especially where you have Kirk and James doing that echoing riff where James will play the first half and then Kirk will play the second half back half an octave higher. And it just sounds really, really interesting. And then they blend that into the main.
So they had some good ideas.
There was still some musically interesting pieces on this record, but I don't think this is as impactful, especially as the other ones.
I agree. I think it's just I don't know. I'm just a simpleton, I guess. I don't know.
I think it gets unjustly maligned by a lot of people. One of our panelists included.
People don't like it, but it's far from their worst stuff.
My dislike of this album isn't a recent thing either. Even when I first heard it, I was like, I'm not really digging this.
Yeah, I can see that. From.
True, I was a teenager and I was just starting to dig into the death metal scene, so that could have had something to do with it too.
Yeah, that makes sense.
True, where a lot of us were really kids when this came out, and this was the first really we heard from Metallica, and then heard the later stuff.
Yeah.
So this is what we were like. We kind of came into it from the back, where it's just like, okay, this is what we knew, and then the really good stuff came later for us. Whereas you guys were hearing what they used to sound like and then heard this. At the same time, other bands were running with their sound and building on it.
Yeah. Because it's a lot about timing when you hear certain things. Obviously, me being a young person, a young'un here, I kind of heard things in a different order. So I guess for me, it's like I didn't have the same kind of impact in that way, I suppose. I think that does have a lot to do with it, like how and when you hear certain albums as well.
Yeah, I think if you had been listening to them all along from 83 to 91, and because that's only an 8-year period too, so that's like still fairly recent in terms of music. So you're just like, oh yeah, they keep building and keep getting better. And Justice for All, it's like, okay, it's a little odd, but they have a new bassist, so whatever. And then you hear this, it's like, okay, what's going on?
Yeah.
So I think part of it is the timing.
And when this came out, you had a lot of really other just more intricate metal albums coming out. You're talking about the stripped down sound. True, with what I listen to, stripped down sound is par for the course. You don't get much more simple than Burzum.
Yeah, pretty much.
But at the same time, you had Carcass Necroticism come out this same year, and that album is fucking amazing.
And you had, even in the thrash metal genre, you had Rust in Peace to come out the year before.
Yep. And Seasons in the Abyss was around the same time. And Persistence of Time.
And Vulgar Display of Power came out a year later, and Cowboys
fucking Pantera, yes.
So it's one of those things where
they were no longer alone in the genre doing those kind of records, and then they were leaving that genre at the same time. So it was kind of
and so much incredible stuff is coming out at the same time. When you hear this, it's just like, all right. And then you pop on like Rust in Peace or Seasons in the Abyss or Necroticism. It's just like, oh my good goddamn.
Yeah.
So I get it. Like timing is important.
Very much so. Very, very much
so. I think if I was like listening to it then, I probably would feel completely different about it.
The other thing too is like they came out with records like the same year, a whole shit ton of really, really great records hit. Like 83, you saw like all the major thrash metal bands release their first record.
Yeah, Show No Mercy came out that year. Kill 'Em All.
I think Anthrax's first record came out in 83 as well.
Let me check that. You might be right.
That sounds right.
Although their first album's kind of
Yeah, their first album was just kind of okay, but Anthrax would build on that later. They were one of the two types of bands. Like Metallica, you had the guys that knocked it out of the park their first few records and then kind of backslid. Yeah. And then Anthrax, you had the guys who the first records just kind of okay, whatever, and then they kind of found their feet later on.
Fistful of Metal was 84.
84, okay, so
84,
not too long after that. But you just had constant releases from these bands, and like within 6 month windows of each other, and it was just like they were all trying to one up each other throughout the entire 80s, and then it was almost like they were really driving each other to be better and more complex and more creative. And then Metallica just kind of hung a left in 91, and everyone's like, what? Like, you guys like created this sound. What are you doing?
Well, not even just that, but I feel like some of the albums that came after the Black Album, even though it still has that Metallica sound. The style still is like you've got Master of Puppets, and then this one, and then the next one after that. It's like the style just kind of kept changing a little bit, or like drastically almost.
Yeah, and I think part of the hate this album gets is because people know what came next and
Yeah.
see this as the precursor to that.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, but what Amber was saying about timing, I kind of agree with that to a big degree, because if I started hearing black metal like now, I'd be laughing at these dumb fucks. Compared to these, I mean, as much as I love black metal, some of the modern black metal shit is just so absolutely goofy.
Oh yeah, I mean, compared to the original stuff, it's just like you tried.
yeah, pretty much.
Now, to a large extent, a lot of the modern thrash and death metal too. It's just like they're just kind of aping what some of the early bands did. In some ways, I don't know if I'm right on that one, because I'm not huge into the death metal scene, but it just seems like they're just trying to do what other bands have already done rather than what these guys were doing at the time, which was just absolutely blazing the trail right to where we are now.
Yeah. I think one of the big things about death metal is you have like really one of the first bands that kind of pioneered that. So I know we were talking about it the other day is with Black Sabbath. Even though they're more like into like the doom metal subgenre, they kind of had that like starts of the sound in the 70s, and then you kind of like go from there, and you get bands that come out like Cannibal Corpse, which is just like at the time like one of the most heaviest things that had ever existed, basically.
Yeah.
So kind of I almost get the feeling, like I could be wrong, but I almost get the feeling that like a lot of bands that came up in the death metal scene were just like, they saw what Cannibal Corpse was doing, they were like, we want to play like that.
I'll be right back, guys.
That or Morbid Angel, because that first Morbid Angel record was a big influence on a lot of stuff. Altars of Madness is probably still to this day one of their best albums.
Yeah. I've listened to a bit of Morbid Angel, but no, I think you're right, because like, didn't they come out a little bit before Cannibal Corpse?
I don't know, because I can never remember the first Cannibal record, but their first album came out in like '89.
Okay. Yeah, I can't remember the first Cannibal record. I think it was like maybe around the same time. I don't know if it was like 84 or 88. It was like, I don't even fucking remember. I wasn't alive at that time. But yeah, no, Morbid Angel is definitely up there as like one of the greatest for death metal.
Because they're way more technical. Like Trey Azagthoth is a prick, but he's an amazing guitarist.
Yeah. Whereas Cannibal, you kind of have that like more heavy sound. There's like constant double bass, and like your guitar riffs.
And the one thing too is because I've seen Cannibal a bunch of times over the years. They put on a killer live show, and they're also really good dudes.
Yeah.
I've talked with George before. I've talked with Alex before, and those two guys are absolutely fucking hysterical.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's definitely something that gets you really far in the music scene in general. Even though like music can be a cutthroat business, if you're generally a good person, then that tends to get you pretty far and helps you last longer in general, especially too with like band members not rotating out. Because like that's one thing, if you don't have a great attitude or a great perspective with how you approach music and just things in general,
the only band that I've met over the years that I thought were a bunch of complete pricks was Morbid Angel.
Really?
Yeah, and I've talked to King Diamond, and he is fucking awesome. He is a great guy.
I've heard Glenn Danzig can be kind of a douche too.
Yeah, I'm sure. I've met a couple of the guys from Dark Funeral by accident. That was something. They were interesting. I'll tell that story. I was actually at a Cannibal Corpse show. And it was Cannibal Corpse, Angel Corpse, and someone else. I forgot who. And I'm wearing like this Dark Funeral t-shirt that happened to be a bootleg, because we couldn't find Dark Funeral merch in the States at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And we could order from the label, but I'm not about to spend $90 on a hoodie.
Yeah.
Fuck that.
And
especially back then.
Yeah, I'm standing there looking at something. I forgot. I was watching the band playing, and then somebody taps me on my shoulder. I'm like, oh, that's weird. Turn around, and I look. It's two of the guys from Dark Funeral. I'm going, oh, fuck me.
Oh, snap.
And the guy's like, so why are you wearing a bootleg? And I told him flat out, like, we can't find your merch in the States. He's like, oh, really? We're going to have to do something about that. And then I'm sitting there talking to him. There's Araman hung over. Like, he didn't say, I don't know if his English isn't all that good or what, but he barely said 2 words. And the other guy that was there was Caligula, and he's like, oh yeah, you should have seen him last night. Like kicking in hotel room doors. And
why does that not surprise me in the least?
Yeah.
I can't say I've ever raged that hard on a binger, but yeah, that's wild.
I wish I could say I hadn't, but oops. I may or may not have been dared to take a running leap off of the 3rd deck balcony with a poncho liner tied to my wrists and ankles during a hurricane.
Any more to add to that?
Was this when you were in the Marines or not?
Yes.
That explains a whole hell of a lot.
That was the only time it would work, is when the wind was like really heavy, and you could just kind of glide like base jumping. It has a name in the Marine Corps. It's called the Okinawan Flying Squirrel.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
And it does actually work. Sometimes you won't die.
And here I thought I did a bunch of insane shit in my Viking reenactment days.
Because you did.
Well, yeah, I did. Yeah, I most certainly did.
I can't say I've ever done anything that crazy drinking, but there was one time I did like a boxing match with some friends that we were all having a party at one of my old houses, and had one of those like above ground pools that had like the actual walls and stuff, but it was completely drained out, didn't have the liner or anything. And so it was like, my friend had some boxing gloves, so I was like, hey, let's do some matches. And yeah, that was fun. Got my nose almost broken. But nothing crazy like what you're talking about.
Yeah, there have been some festivals where there have been some pretty interesting things happening. Trying to mostly like stupid shit, like, you know, guys trying to get on the tour bus with the band and getting their ass beat by security.
I've seen that a few times. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, it is.
And me and my buddies are just standing there shaking our heads going, wow, you people are fucking dumb.
Yeah, it's like, did you really think that would work?
Don't do that unless you like personally know the dudes.
Yeah.
Half the time it won't be security throwing your ass off the bus. It'll be the band.
Yeah, because I've been on tour buses. I was actually on the Cannibal tour bus at one point. Yeah, it's their living space, you know.
Yeah.
It's not neat and organized. It's messy. It's, you know, it's a bunch of dudes, you know, living on the road for however long. Give them their space. Give them, you know. Yeah, I'm sure they'd rather be at home in their bed and not on, you know, some fold out bed or whatever they have on the tour bus.
Sleeping on a couch in the back.
Yeah. And usually when you're starting out and you're doing the demos and just like local tours, you don't even have a bus. You just have like either a truck or a van.
A van, yeah. Because a few years back, I saw Warbringer. They were playing some little dive bar by me, like just because. And then as soon as they were done with that gig, they were driving all the way back to California in a van.
Yeah, not fun. I remember a couple of years back, I saw Candy Striper Death Orgy at a little dive bar in Methuen. Haverhill. And these guys rock up in like a rape van with it's just like a black van that's just like all spray bomb. It's like, oh god.
Windows blacked out and everything.
Pretty much, yeah. I think it was one of the old panel vans, so it didn't have the rear windows.
Okay, yeah.
It just had like Candy Striper Death Orgy painted up, like spray painted on the side of it. It was the most awesome thing ever.
That's funny.
But no, I mean those small shows are great in a lot of cases too. Like a lot of local bands that no one's ever heard of, or like the really small venues, you really get some great shows.
Yeah.
Because that's where it all started for us. Like like it's all like the little dive bars and stuff like that we don't mind tearing apart.
Oh yeah. Or
I told you about the one by me, right? That had like the beam right in the center of the stage.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's better in the middle of the stage than in the middle of the crowd because
No, there was one there too.
Oh, good. So the band can run into the one on stage, and the guys in the crowd can get thrown into the one in the middle of the crowd.
Yeah.
Oh man, like imagine like that being the edge of the mosh pit too, and you're just the one who manages to go out that way.
Could be worse.
True. You could get caught in the middle.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird though. Like my area of New York is kind of strange because I'm in between New York City and Albany.
Mm-hmm.
So when it came to metal and growing up and finding bands, we kind of got lucky because we had some of the New York City influence coming up here, but not all that much. Like, New York was lower New York was great for metal back in the day because, thrash, you had Overkill out of Northern Jersey.
Yep. And then
you had Demolition Hammer, which was from the same region, and those guys are so damn good and so underrated.
Oh yeah.
Demolition Hammer is fucking awesome.
And then
I heard Nick ramble about them a lot, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? Let's listen to these guys, and they're fantastic.
Yes, they are. And then we had a great death metal scene even because Morticians from my neck of the woods, Suffocations from Lower New York.
Yep.
But, in my immediate area was Morpheus Descends.
Okay.
And those guys, if you want some good, just down-tuned, almost doomy death metal, you can't go wrong with those guys. Plus, they're good dudes. But we just had, I can remember shows. There was a period of time, like late 90s, I think for like 2 months straight, every weekend I was at a show of some kind for metal.
Nice.
And that never happened again.
Yeah.
It's just one of those years where it all just coincided, where they were all just like one right after another.
Like 1 week was Cannibal, another week was Testament, and then Overkill, and then this band and that band. It was phenomenal. And then same venue still exists, but they don't. The problem with their booking is unless they know the band will sell tickets, they just don't even bother. So they'll only pick up bands like Testament and Cannibal Corpse these days, like that kind of level.
Yeah.
And it's kind of frustrating.
Yeah, because you want to see the newer guys too. Like one band I've really wanted to see live because I absolutely love their freaking albums, but they're too new for a lot of the venues around here, unless they're an opener, is Unleash the Archers.
Right.
They're
pretty
phenomenal.
decent.
They're phenomenal. And like they're really power metal with that little bit of death metal influence. And kind of symphonic in a way too, where they have their clean singer and Brittany Hayes, and then their male lead, who's more of a death metal singer. And I really want to see them live, and they never come to the area.
That sucks.
No one comes to my area. The UK like music scene is just pretty lame overall.
Which I think is really weird because that's where a lot of these bands started. Like the new wave of British heavy metal and a lot of the rock from the 60s and stuff like that was all coming out of England. Either
they'll go to like a few big venues in the country, mostly London, and it just means it's kind of difficult to travel and stay in these places, and also the venue, I'm not keen on a lot of the venues in London unless it's like smaller venues. Really? Anyway. Yeah.
I'm in the same way, just in general. I'd rather go to like a dive bar or a club than a big arena.
Yeah. The Palladium in Worcester. The Palladium around me in Worcester, about 1,500 people, is a great venue.
Yeah, I've been to the Palladium.
Yeah, it's just a great venue.
Yeah, it's a nice
venue.
That's
not too big.
kind of like a more mid-sized venue. Like you got a few bars, outdoor areas you can go to smoke and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I prefer that more over like bigger shows, arenas, or
Yeah,
festivals.
for sure.
Yeah, because I really hate waiting online to go take a piss.
Right. Fucking A, man.
And if you're lucky, everyone else waited with you instead of just pissing on the ground right next to you.
Yeah.
If you're lucky.
That is not a guarantee.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, like a lot of the big festivals I've been to, unless you get there like right as like the first bands are going on and no one's there yet, then you're just gonna be like lost in the sea of people in the back somewhere. And
I don't dig the festival scene. Like I did it a couple of times when I was younger, but yeah, no.
I mean, I'd kill for some of those festivals you guys get over in Europe, though. Jesus.
Oh God, yeah.
Some of the bands,
some of the lineups are just ridiculous.
Yeah, I'd say that. Yeah, the lineups that we have for the festivals are really good. Download. I went to, which is where I saw Metallica.
Nice.
Or at least attempted to see them. So yeah. But other than that, it's not great. I think you have it better over there.
You guys also in Europe have Wacken.
Yeah, Wacken. Really... I do want to go to Wacken one year because they usually have a just absolutely stellar lineup. And it's like a 3-day festival too.
Hole in the Sky is another one in Norway.
Oh yeah, I'd go there for sure.
That's got so many good bands usually playing.
That and that's nothing like seeing Norwegian death metal in Norway.
Yeah, that too. Well, that was a I guess you could say it was a charity for the guy from Windir who accidentally died.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was either it's not him. I think it might be for Grimm from Immortal. I know. I'm pretty sure it was based around it was a charity or a tribute to one of those guys who either ended their existence or something stupid happened. Like the guy from Windir died from exposure.
Oof.
He was walking to a family cabin and got lost when it was like a blizzard or something.
And in Norway, that's pretty much it for you.
Yeah.
Because when they say blizzard, they mean like we're getting 4 feet in the next 24 hours.
That's unfortunate.
So, but that festival, from everything I've seen, is just like, oh dear God.
Yeah, like I wish we had a lot bigger and better festivals around my area because like even like the New England area, there's not even a bigger venue around for like a larger festival like that. Like the biggest we'd have is probably what used to be the Tweeter Center. I forget what they call it now.
You don't have a lot of massive fields like in the middle of nowhere.
We really don't. Like there is no part of Massachusetts that's really the middle of nowhere. Like, I mean, Western Mass has a couple, but like you would never have a metal show out there.
Well, the funny thing too is about the States, there's always been just one big festival.
Yeah.
For a long time, it was the Milwaukee Death Fest. And then there was a few years break, and then there was nothing other than all like the mainstream stuff like, Ozfest or whatever. And now within the past few years, we were getting, Maryland Death Fest.
Back when the Warped Tour was still good.
Yeah.
Like the first few years of it.
When they had some actual metal bands playing at Warped Tour. And some of their punk band lineups were decent too, but
it got really
nowadays
punk later on.
Yeah, nowadays I'm like I look at the lineup, I'm like, there's no one here I want to see. What the hell?
It's turned into like a pop music festival. It's like what?
Yeah.
Well, did you guys see that lineup for that festival that's hit in Vegas?
No.
Like the headliners were Merciful Fate, Emperor, and Suicidal Tendencies.
Oh, okay.
And it's the same weekend as the meetup in Vegas.
Oh, God, I might need to go to Vegas now.
Shit, I might have to go.
But it's not just a metal fest; it's a straight up music fest because they list those 3 metal bands, and the next one in the list is Bone Thugs and Harmony.
Yeah, but just a chance to see Emperor live, I did.
Emperor and Merciful Fate.
Yeah,
actually, all 3 of those bands.
Because Merciful Fate hasn't been around in a while.
Well, King had his heart surgery and all that. Like he was not in a good place.
Yeah, no. And then I think he did a couple of tours with King Diamond.
Yeah. because that live footage that's out there of him doing Sleepless Nights, that's recent, was like not right after, but after his heart surgeries.
Yep. And in a way, I kind of wish he got Mickey D to come back, because Mickey D is just one of the best drummers on the fucking planet. But unfortunately, he's with the Scorpions now, who are on their farewell tour, I think.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, yeah.
But this is what, like, so many bands have done farewell tours that end up lasting like 4 years. Looking at you, Slayer.
They just need a little vacation, basically, a short holiday.
Well, it wasn't even that. It was that their actual farewell tour lasted like everyone's like, oh yeah, we gotta go because it's the last time we're gonna see him, and then they came around like 3 more times.
Oh wow.
It's the last time, we promise, except we're adding a whole nother lap around the US and Europe onto it. They just kept adding. Yeah, they just kept adding dates to it for like 2 years. And it's just like, oh. But no, I mean, it was good to see them come through one last time. That's the only time I've ever seen them live, and holy shit, what a live band.
Yeah, I caught them late 90s with Biohazard and Machine Head.
Ooh, back before Machine Head was really freaking.
And then the next week or 2 weeks after that, it was Pantera and Typo in the same venue.
Oh yeah, this is back when they had Peter Steele, right?
Yes.
Nice. No, I mean, if you guys have not listened to Typo Negative, you guys need to, chat. They're just one of those bands that just.
Typo Negative. Yeah, I haven't listened to them.
Oh man, they are just brilliant.
They definitely have a unique sound. They're one of those bands, and if you hear me talk about music a lot, you'll hear me talk about like a band's sound. Like, for example, Pope's heard me say this, and probably a couple of people in chat might have heard me say this already. Like, I despise Dimmu Borgir after their first 2 albums. Despise it.
Yeah.
To me, that's, we're going to try to be mainstream black metal if there is such a thing. But the other thing too is
their first albums were great.
Their first 2 records, For Altid and Stormblast, have such a unique sound, and they tossed it away.
I feel like a lot of bands do that in the search for commercial success, and they wrongly consider that their first couple albums, it wasn't just because nobody had heard them yet. It was because, we weren't commercial enough. Like, no, bad. Stop.
Well, the first demo album was on a really small label. It was on No Colors Records out of Germany.
Yeah.
And then they were on Cacophonous Records out of the UK. So neither of those were really big. The only other band that I can remember from Cacophonous was Gehenna.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't heard of those labels before.
Yeah, No Colors is kind of dodgy. A lot of people think they're on the Supreme side of things. No, if you go and look at, and even though they did have a couple bands that are dodgy, like Graveland, none of their album covers had color at all. They were all black and white covers.
Okay.
Which, with black metal, how can you tell? That's what 90% of it is anyway.
Well, yeah, but the albums actually had detail other than just taking a picture at night in the woods with a flash.
Fair.
That's basically
every Dark Throne album cover.
Every like 90s, every shitty 90s black metal album cover ever, where it's just them in the middle of the woods at night.
Yeah, in corpse paint, and all you see is their face because they use the flash.
Yeah, wearing all black.
And most of the shadows are either like props that they've put around them or just actual trees.
Yeah.
And they just turn the contrast way the hell down.
I'm sure the first couple of album covers that did that looked excellent, because about every black metal
through the scene.
Yeah.
I mean, like the first couple times they did it, we're like, oh, that's really great, and then everyone did it.
Yeah. Isn't that how it goes with like almost every genre? There's like 1 or 2 bands that does something really well, and then everybody else copies them.
Yeah, I agree on that, but at least with black metal, you had the whole scene doing it.
Yeah.
When that first started, rearing its ugly head, you had Emperor, you had Burzum, you had Mayhem, you had Immortal, you had Behemoth even starting up in Poland,
Dark Throne,
Marduk, Dark Funeral, Opeth was one of the early bands in the black metal scene, even though they went completely prog now.
Yeah, they're way different now than what they used to sound like.
But you didn't just have one or two bands doing it in that.
Mm-hmm.
You had that entire scene just coming out and blowing the doors off everything. Even Cradle of Filth in their first two releases were good.
Here's a black sheep, because they're not really even a metal band anymore. In fact, they're like way out there in the pop punk scene. But Underoath, their first album was a black metal album, and after that, they had some like screamo sound. It just totally changed. I didn't like it. I didn't like it after that first album. I was like, what happened?
Another example Darius brought up from the chat is the band Ulver from Norway. Their first three records are all different. The first one is like prog metal, no black metal tones really to it at all. The second one was all acoustic folk songs. And then their third one was such lo-fi black metal it would make Darkthrone blush.
Now, I've heard of some people doing that, but they like have it's like a different project each time instead of under the same band name, you know.
That happened. That's also something that happened a lot in the early black metal scene. There was a lot of proliferation of people's side projects. Like Fenris from Darkthrone had like 4 projects, including Darkthrone, going all at the same time.
Yeah.
He had Eisenguard, Darkthrone, Storm, and Neptune's Towers.
Eisenguard. Okay, I've heard that one before.
It's not really that good.
Yeah.
It's one of those things like some of the stuff is very much so I guess he was doing Isengard stuff at the same time as early Darkthrone, because some of the stuff is definitely like Darkthrone style from, I want to say, like it was like stuff that they used for demos, like stuff off the Goat Lord disc.
I was going to say, like, of course it's not very good. It's Fenris without the other band members telling him no.
Yeah. But then they had then he had the other project, Storm, which was him and Satyr from Satyricon. And the female singer, I can't remember her name, from Third in the Mortal.
Okay.
And that was all straight up like Norwegian folk songs with a bit of a metal edge. And Fenris can't sing. So.
Well, no, of course he can't.
He can barely play drums.
Right. And and like, let's face it, most of the time you're lucky if he's sober enough to actually like be able to play.
Yeah.
Or at least back in the day. I don't know if he's still like that or not. A lot of those guys clean up or they just die.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing though, too. Like, Norway, as pretty as the country is, it's also dismally depressive.
Yeah.
Both socially and climate-wise.
Not much else to do but drink, you know.
Drink, yeah. That's why all these guys formed bands, is there was nothing else to do.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when you look at it, even back in the day, like all the Scandinavians did was drink and fight, because that's basically all there was to do.
Yep.
We drink, we fight, we farm, and then we do it again. And then occasionally we'll go to other places and take their shit.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But I mean, one thing I haven't heard a lot of recently is bands coming out of the UK. In a lot of it. Is there like an underground scene over there that we're just not hearing about, or is it just kind of disappeared?
If there is, I don't know about it.
Okay.
Even with my fingers in the underground scene, I don't hear much out of the UK these days.
Yeah.
Like,
late 90s, there was a few bands that came out, like, again, Cradle of Filth. There was Balsagoth, which was like Robert E. Howard inspired death metal. And then you had there's another one that was more recent, I believe, was Ackercock.
Okay. But yeah, it's really weird that like all of the bands coming out in the late 70s, early 80s were all from the UK.
Yeah.
And now we don't really.
Yeah, and now there's just nothing.
Huge amount.
Yeah, UK and Germany were the two big ones in the 70s and 80s, and now it's like, oh, more Euro trash pop. I wonder where that came from.
we can blame Scandinavia for some of that too.
Yes, we can. I won't say otherwise. Ace of Base was a thing. God damn you, Swedes.
Yep, Bjork.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that's Icelandic, but yeah.
Yeah, same thing. It's just they're just as guilty.
Yeah. I mean, Sweden also did give us Europe, so
yes, this is true.
We had that conversation during Battery.
And ABBA.
Yeah. What was that we said? Oh yeah, Europe killed metal coming out of Sweden for decades.
Yeah, pretty much.
It wasn't.
Sorry, carry on. No, I was just going to say, going back to the UK bands thing, it's more like metalcore bands rather than any stuff that maybe you guys are more into. But yeah, it's not like a huge amount. There's bands like Architects, which I like.
Architects is good, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a bit weird.
It's kind of weird. Like the home of metal kind of migrated from like the Midlands in the UK to Sweden and Norway.
Mm-hmm.
And that like even the trad heavy and power metal bands that we're hearing about now are all coming out of like either Scandinavia or Canada somehow.
A little bit of Germany too with the power metal stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Finland too.
Yeah, Finland's had a great scene in like the past 10 years.
Like bands like Battle Beast and Beast in Black are both fantastic.
Well, the funny thing is too is like the early days of black metal, like the Finnish stuff wasn't that good. Like it really, really wasn't. Like Impaled Nazarene was nothing to write home about.
Yeah, and Trey, that's not actually true. They're just not coming out of England anymore. There's a band out of Canada called Riot City that sounds a lot like Early Priest.
Riot City. Why does that sound familiar?
I think I was talking to you about them the other day.
Yeah.
They have one album and they just released a new single, and it's all really, really fantastic. But like, there's a whole slew of new bands coming out, but none of them are that big yet, and they're all from Sweden. Like Ambush, Enforcer, Eclipse, they're all from Sweden. Ghost, obviously.
Ghost. Yeah, there's one.
Which, if you guys haven't seen me and Amber review the new Ghost album, go do that. It was really good. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was fun.
And the album's good too. I think Ghost does a lot of really interesting things musically.
Yeah.
And speaking of the influence of Metallica, they were the ones who blew Ghost up, because on one tour in like 2009, Ghost opened for them on a tour.
Okay.
So a lot of people finally got to hear them.
I didn't know that. Yeah, they've got a very unique sound that's just like definitely I haven't seen anybody else do before. Yeah.
Darius saying they're well dressed black metal. Why does that not surprise me that a band from the UK is extremely well dressed? But no, I mean, like the scenes change. It's funny to see it all come like full circle, because you have a lot of bands coming out now playing like the 70s and 80s style of heavy metal. Meanwhile, in like the 90s, you couldn't find a trad heavy band if you were looking for one. And you have a lot of the original artists coming out now too with new stuff. Like the last three, except Saxon and Priest records, have all been absolutely monstrous.
Yeah. Darius brings up another comment about Deaf Heaven. I just recently found out about them last year, and they're
I've never heard them, so
they're like a so if you take instrumental post-rock music, I don't know if you've ever heard of like Explosions in the Sky type stuff, and mix it with kind of like a death metal, black metal type feel. They kind of just mash two totally different genres together. Deaf Heaven's really interesting, but it's a specific sort of style of music. Not everybody likes them, but there's an interesting thing he brings up. A lot of newer bands that are coming out, or at least around like UK and America. You mentioned like metalcore, Amber. There's that, and then like this different like sort of tech metal, prog metal sort of scenes that are coming out. Maybe like past 5 years, I'd say that a lot of people are really, really catching on to. It seems like those styles are way more popular than you'd see with like thrash or power metal. And people look at like those styles for whatever odd reason, they look at it as like, oh, that's the metal your dad or your grandpa listens to, which is it's totally not true. It's just,
Yeah. I appreciate this.
Yeah, it's some of the bands are cool. I'm not like Deaf Heaven's. I mean, it's a cool idea, but I'm not a huge fan of Deaf Heaven. Like there are other bands I'd rather listen to, like Conducting from the Grave or Black Dahlia Murder. But I grew up listening to those with high school, so go figure.
And there's bands out there like that, like Dream Theater with me, where musically it's really interesting, but I just can't listen to it all that much because I will just get bored with it. Because a lot of it is like, these 13-minute epics that are just like, it's musically really interesting, but I get bored like halfway through and want to listen to something else.
It'll be great when you're on a long drive and you've got like a shuffle playlist of like all these different bands and stuff that you listen to, and you get like one Dream Theater song you really like pop up. You'd be like, yeah, this is great. But yeah, I think you have to be like a really like diehard fan to want to listen to their entire album kind of deal. I agree. Yeah.
And it's funny because earlier prog stuff, I am not like that with, like, some songs like Xanadu by Rush, or like, even 2112 or Cygnus X1. I'll listen to the whole freaking album and not even bat an eye.
Rush is a timeless classic, though.
Yeah, I think they are one of the musically most talented bands of all time.
Yeah.
Especially when you have all the stuff that they were doing at the same time. Like, you have Geddy Lee singing, playing bass, and then playing a freaking synth with his foot.
Yeah, he's got one of those cool piano foot pad synths. It's so cool.
And like the shit they were able to do with three guys.
Yeah.
And they did it live too. Like, that wasn't just like, their album sound and then they had a big band for the live show. Like, they would do it that way live.
And if you get a look at Neil Peart's drum set, like, holy
it's
cow.
all around him.
Yeah.
Like, they actually have to close the drum set behind him.
Yeah.
And then Alex Lifeson just has that perfect tone to his guitar where it's like really upbeat, but also like pretty heavy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like songs like Working Man or Limelight is just like, yes. And like, and you can tell, there's probably a little Rush influence, like I said earlier, in Metallica as well.
It's entirely possible, yeah.
Because you can see it with some of the odd time signatures and a lot of Lars's hi-hat work and stuff like that. It kind of sounds interesting, and more like you'd hear in something like Rush, or as Sentinel says, Iron Maiden. So like, I think that it had this really interesting melding of like the extreme metal side with Venom and the hard rock and NWO BHM sound with Motorhead and Maiden kind of come together into thrash in the early 80s. And again, I think it was just they were seeing what other guys were doing and then just took the next step and went a little further with it. And then bands like Cannibal Corpse took a step even further. And like, the same thing with black metal, where originally you had bands like Sodom, Hellhammer, Bathory, and Venom. And then the second wave bands all just expanded on that sound and went even further with it. And it was just, definitely. Around 1980, you just had all these different genres of heavy metal, especially, just start popping up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I think you have a lot of the prog and NWO BHM bands to thank for that, where they were all a little different and all trying to kind of create their own sound. And this one's just absolutely true. No Lemmy, you wouldn't have most of modern metal. And Sentinel, you're going to know my answer for this one already. It's the album I Want to Do With You that came out this year. That would be 1982. And the album would be Screaming for Vengeance, my favorite heavy metal album of all time, which you still haven't contacted me on. Hint, hint.
Isn't it nice dealing with me? You're just like, hey, I want you on this day. Yeah, all right.
Like, hey, yeah, pretty much. I'll just text him and be like, hey, are you available on Sunday? Yeah.
Although I would have appreciated you telling me we were starting earlier.
Yeah, sorry, I did. I forgot.
No, I saw the time. I was like, oh, all right. I thought we were starting at 4.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's no worries. I also didn't know Amber's from the UK, so that makes sense.
Sorry.
No. No need to apologize. It's probably what, like, almost going on 11 there for you.
It's 20 to 10 now.
Okay,
so
5 hours.
Bad. So yeah, this is a good time for me, so I appreciate it.
Oh, that's not a
Yeah,
problem.
no worries.
It's only an hour difference, so it's not like.
Okay.
Well, Sentinel, that's when you need to come on to Gilded with the rest of us, where they won't kick you off. And there's a link right down in the description of the video for all you guys to come hang out on my Gilded server.
Hint.
Hint.
Yeah,
The only reason I got bothered getting a Gilded account, so
and I do like playing around with Gilded a lot more than Discord.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot nicer.
Yeah, and Discord, I think, like, that's all it's ever going to be, is what it is right now. And Gilded, I see them adding new functionality all the time. And hey, Thomas, how's it going, man? It was great to see you guys. I've been
polluting that one channel on 70s Gilded with nothing but song links.
Yep.
Like all sorts of insanity. Actually, what was cool was that guy that was on Toxic Tuesday the other week. Or no, not Toxic Tuesday. Thursday, whatever fucking comic show on Thursday is called.
Thursday Night Throwdown.
Yeah.
The one that got yeeted by YouTube.
No, not that one. The one they did the week before, where they had that XLR7 guy, Mike.
Oh yeah, he's really cool.
I posted that Black Braid track, and for Amber and Sarge, if you like black metal even a little, check out this band from the States called Black Braid. It's Native American black metal.
Yeah, I've listened to it, and it's really, really cool.
Fucking good.
Black Brave.
Braid.
I want to see it.
I gotta write that down.
Always like recommendation.
Yes, it's one of those things where it's
really interesting too, where they kind of combine like native music with black metal in a way that really meshes well.
Did you notice the horse gallop drum beat?
Yes, I did.
It's good production for black metal. It's got some thrash elements to it, a little bit of melodic elements to it. The guy's vocals are decent. And I've listened to a lot of black metal from a lot of places. And I always tend to prefer something that you can tie the music to where it's originating from or the people it's originating from. So like, when it comes to like Scandinavian black metal, I like my black metal from Scandinavia cold, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah.
I tend to listen to a lot more black metal in the winter. Go figure.
That was the best time of year for it, right?
Yeah.
It's the country it comes from.
Yeah.
And Soul Assassin's absolutely right with this. Like, I was hearing a band that came from India recently that like mixed like traditional Indian music in with
Bloody Wood.
Yeah, in with like death metal, and it was
they're okay. I think I'm not sure about certain aspects of them. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
I randomly heard a band, I think they're from Greece, like a while ago, called Rotting Christ.
Yes, they've been around forever.
Oh, okay.
They're one of those bands that kind of been like underneath the like top layer of metal for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Like, everyone who's like really into the scene's like, yes.
Yeah, because like at the same time when you had all the Scandinavian second wave of black metal, Rotting Christ was also there too.
I see.
And they actually just did a soundtrack for a video game recently.
But I like them when I heard them. So
they have a pretty distinct sound to them.
Yeah,
definitely an interesting band name.
Hey, at least it's a name you can say. I know me and Pope both know a few Marty tracks I can't even utter the name of on YouTube without us getting muted.
Yeah, like a lot of, or black metal in general, where it's just like even the song title would get us shut down.
Yep.
And one thing I missed too, and this is just metal as a whole, and Metallica was never really a part of this, but the quote unquote super groups.
Yeah.
Super groups, yeah.
They would all just get together and just like, holy shit.
One of my favorite bands out of Norway is a band called Borknegar. And their first album was a supergroup album. It was Garm from Ulver singing, Grim from Immortal on drums, the guitarist from Enslaved, and I can't remember his name, obviously doing guitars, and the guy who founded the band played bass, I believe, and synth. And it was pretty much progressive black metal. And the first album is so good.
Since you say, I'm interested.
Well, if you start digging into like the early wave of the second wave of black metal, There's a lot of synth going on, like Emperor, for example.
Yep. Jimmy Borger's first 2 records have a lot of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Burzum, if you can tolerate Varg for any reason. Vocals or him just being a complete lunatic.
I think so. One of the like first bands that I heard, sort of like the 80s metal influence, kind of took from like thrash and heavy metal and black metal. Winds of Plague, I think they're from like Illinois or something like that.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
First album had some amazing synths on it, and it was basically since then. And some of the other bands I listen to, like synths with metal, as long as it's done well, it just so good. It hits just right. But yeah, like you're saying, Imperitus with the synths and black metal. And didn't they also have not opera metal, but it's like symphonic metal?
Symphonic metal, yep.
Yeah.
That comes from that area. Like, I don't know if it's Norway specifically, but
it falls into that to me kind of falls into the same line as power metal.
Power metal, yeah.
It's like a subgenre of power metal more than anything else, really.
Yeah, there are a lot. I mean, there's a lot of it from Scandinavia, but it's also like the Netherlands and a lot of places like that, like Delane and Nightwish.
Yeah,
I would say like the first 2 to 4 Limbonic art albums would be considered symphonic black metal. And they're another, like, it's 2 dudes and the guitars are in the background. Like the synths are up in your face.
Yeah.
Or Summoning from Austria.
Yep.
You know, the J.R.R. Tolkien metal band. And again, their synths is what drives the music forward more so than the guitar.
Yeah.
One thing I wish was more prevalent in like the death and black metal scene was like the bands that don't really take themselves all that seriously, and it's more like jokey. Like bands like Ailstorm or
Trollfest.
Trollfest. Or,
have you ever heard the origin story of Trollfest?
No, I don't
it's a bunch of guys from other Norwegian metal bands, and they never really said what other bands they're from, but they all decided that there was no good music to go drink to.
Fair.
And then they did Trollfest, which is like, how do you drink to this?
That's awesome.
It's like, it sounds like a bunch of Balkan musicians strung out on crack. I'm not kidding. It's a bunch of Norwegian dudes playing like Balkan Greek style music. Like, what the fuck?
That's pretty awesome, though. That reminds me, I can't remember what part of Europe I think they're from. There was a band that did like a pirate style metal, where they would take like old like sea shanties and turn it into metal, and just wrote a bunch of other songs about drinking.
That's Ailstorm.
That's either Ailstorm or they're from Scotland.
Okay.
Of course.
Scotland.
They're so good though for what they are.
So good. Oh
really
man.
I remember showing the one video to a friend of mine, and her and her husband are really more into the prog side of things. They just kind of give me that disapproving head nod once in a while when it comes to music. And she was like, wow. Because the first thing I think of when it comes to pirates is a guy playing a guitar.
Yep. And like,
why a guitar?
And the funny thing is, you'd think Ailstorm was like the more ridiculous band to come out of Scotland, but no,
but they're not.
Because Glory Hammer's a thing.
Yeah. Man.
And then you have bands like Austrian Death Machine, where it's just like, just the concept is hilarious, where you just have a metal band that all of their songs are just Arnold quotes.
Yeah. That's
you mentioned Trollfest. Have you ever heard of I can't think of the name of it, but they're like goblin themed metal. They call themselves like Goblin Core or whatever.
I've heard of them. I'm not impressed.
Yeah. I just thought it was hilarious.
I mean, the closest thing I get to that is I'm a big Fintroll fan. And I try to describe them to some people, and it's so hard because they really have a unique sound. And I'm like, so imagine Danny Elfman doing the Beetlejuice soundtrack, and he decided to make it metal.
Yeah.
And that's pretty accurate too.
And then, like, especially like, you could almost have an entire genre called Tolkien metal, where like the band name and freaking like their entire sound is just all based on it. Like bands like Numenorian.
Yeah, Summoning is another one that falls into that Tolkien metal.
Obviously, Eisenguard.
Not really.
Well, Isengard is.
Well, yeah, but the name, but none of the song material was, to my knowledge. Because then you would have Gorgoroth and Burzum as well.
True. And EDM metal, I would call more on industrial and stuff like that. Like bands like Amaranth and stuff like that are more on the power or industrial side of the house. which we were actually just talking. Me and Sarton were just talking about an old industrial band the other day, Fear Factory.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Their
They're
first two
great.
albums their second album especially is so good. I remember when that came out, I was listening to that constantly.
I remember one of the first albums I ever bought was Obsolete. And that record was just freaking great.
Their first album too, Fear of a New Machine, was really good. That was a little bit more on the death metal side before they really started like enhancing the drum triggers.
Yeah, I heard them. I discovered them like maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, and I'd heard their newer stuff with like crazy fast drum triggers. But their old stuff is really good.
And then obviously you have like the early era of Rammstein where they were really more industrial and didn't just become Rammstein.
Well, yeah. I said this to Pope when we did the Battery stream. I got lucky in the fact that I had a really big college in my area that had a radio station that I could pick up at my house. And they did an underground metal show once a week. So I got to hear a bunch of stuff that way. That was the first time I heard Grave, Fear Factory, Dark Throne, whole bunch of other stuff. And I also had a shop that was local that specialized in metal stuff. So t-shirts and albums and patches and posters, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And like, I really just happened to have a bunch of friends who were into the scene.
Oh yeah, I had that.
And would constantly be feeding me new bands to listen to once they knew I was into it. Because it was like that era where like you weren't like really openly a metal fan. Like you're like, oh yeah, I listened to most of the rock stuff, and then like secretly you're like, and here's Battery.
Yeah. Well, look what I said. I graduated high school in '94. I was the only person in my graduating class of around 800 to 1,000 that openly listened to metal.
Yeah, like, and I was like one of the only people around that would like listen to a lot of the heavier stuff. Like, I knew everybody in my era was, into like Green Day and Blink-182 and all that because that was the shit we grew up with. And I gravitated more towards like Korn, Gojira, Rob Zombie, Meshuggah.
And I can safely say too, I was the only person in my graduating class that not only was openly into metal, was openly into like death metal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because there'd be other people who might like, whatever, Metallica and some of the old school trad stuff or some of the older thrash stuff, but death metal, oh no.
Yeah, Metallica was popular, but that I didn't even when I bought that Metallica record, like I didn't really consider myself a metalhead at that point because like it was on the radio, it was just mainstream rock and roll as far as we were concerned. And then later on, I started learning more. And then once I heard Brave New World by Iron Maiden and really dove down the rabbit hole with them, that was when I really turned into a metalhead. And unfortunately, I came in at the exact wrong point in Iron Maiden's career because that was like the last truly great album they ever did. But no, I mean, that era in the 90s too, like, it was such a different sound for metal at the time because a lot of the traditional bands either were wicked underground or just went away or went on hiatus for like 6 years.
Yeah, in the 90s metal, it was a sad time for metal.
Yeah, because I mean, let's face it, Priest had pretty much gone away from 92 to 98 because Rob wasn't in the band, and I think it took until 98 for them to release Jugulator. And then you had bands like Iron Maiden that had Blaze Bayley, and no one was fucking listening because
that was terrible.
I mean,
that was just terrible.
I still hope the guy that made that decision got fired.
I mean, Blaze Bayley is a good singer, but
not for that.
Not for Maiden. Sorry.
It's like you took a guy with a 4-octave range and replaced him with a guy with a 2-octave range, and then asked him to do songs like "Run to the Hills." No.
Yeah, it does not work.
That was just never going to play out the way people thought it would. And then, a lot of bands just went on hiatus for that period. And then there were bands we wish had, like Metallica.
Yeah, well, there's certain things you just can't, it's like, again, even in the underground scenes, you saw certain bands change and like, oh, what are you doing? And other bands come up and like, wow, okay, wow, this is phenomenal, and it's not derivative of what everybody else is doing.
And Sentinel's absolutely right here, because they were written for I think they were written for Bruce Dickinson and they just hadn't been done yet. And then Blaze was trying to do them, or they were writing it like Bruce was still in the band because they'd been doing it for so long. And then that was just the end of it, pretty much.
And as someone who's alive, in my later teenage years, early 20s and the late 90s, you had to dig for stuff. You had to start going through like liner notes and albums to find other band names to go check out. It's like, oh, this band likes these guys. Let me go check them out. Yeah.
And like, unless you were going to the shows and stuff like that, you wouldn't hear any of the newer guys coming up.
You would and you wouldn't. I mean, like I said, again, I got lucky with the area I lived in with both the shop and the radio show. So made it a little bit easier to check out other bands.
Yeah, true.
But you didn't really need to go to shows because I know a lot of people too, not in my area, but they just had that one friend who happened to get like fanzines.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And the fanzines would really, really, really turn you on to a lot of stuff.
The worst part was a lot of those guys just went away after a while, or they just started to suck, like Heavy Metal Magazine or Kerrang or stuff like that. Like,
yeah,
like I used to love the art in heavy metal. Like I used to collect the magazines just for the art. Like I didn't even care about what was in it.
There was a good zine that came out of the Netherlands. The same guy who did that also started Hammerheart Records.
Okay,
I can't remember what the zine was called, but it was pretty big back in the day.
Yeah, and then like Kerrang started freaking going off the rails, and
yeah,
it was just like why, and everyone just stopped paying attention. I don't think Kerrang and a couple of the other ones ever really made the jump to the digital format, and I know heavy metal didn't, because people collected that like they collected comic books,
right?
Whereas now they're just like, oh,
yeah. I mean, Kerrang's still around. I don't know if Pit is still around.
I haven't heard of them in a long time, so if they are around, they've kind of gone quiet. And unfortunately, what we're stuck with is sites like Loudwire and freaking
Metal sucks and
Metal Injection, all that kind of stuff.
All those freaking knuckleheads.
Yeah,
I can't even stand to read any of those magazines. It's just, I mean, sometimes it's cool like hear about an important announcement like a new album coming out, but
that's the only reason I still follow any of them. Is because they will get news before everybody else.
Yeah.
And you'll have the occasional good interview with somebody like Rob Halford or frickin' Corpse Grinder or something like that. If George will even talk to them anymore.
Yeah.
He probably does, because it's in his contract.
Yeah, probably. It's just like you're talking to Metal Injection. It's like, oh, do I have to?
Yeah.
Rockfeed I haven't heard of. I'll have to check them out. But yeah, I mean, and a lot of the articles you'll see in especially freaking Loudwire, you can tell the guy writing is just a freaking hipster douchebag.
Most likely.
And then you have Metal Sucks, which is they're just trying to tear down every aspect of the underground they can. It's like, yeah, you can just piss right off.
Yeah, it's just like they try to. It's again this hipster douchebag mentality where we have to deconstruct everything. It's like, no, we can just listen to it because it's good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get the whole.
I've met so many people. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
It's just a funny point because you guys like talking about people that introducing them to music. Like I haven't really had that much, especially not with any sort of metal stuff. And I've met a lot of people that I've met that are into music are exactly that kind of hipster douchebag, as you say.
They're really pretentious and think their brand of music is the most amazing thing ever, and everything else is just...
and you're never as knowledgeable as them. And it's like, yeah, that might be the case, but that doesn't mean don't want to have a good conversation or just learn something new, which is how I feel about.
They're super close-minded.
Yeah.
And ever since I started doing this channel, I have learned so much from guys like 70s Rock Fan, Imperitus, Nick Weiser, all you guys.
Yeah, I have learned so much from listening to all your streams and things. So
yeah, and I like having the older guys too, like Final Revival and 70s Rock Fan, because these guys were around when these bands came out and were old enough to go to the shows and tell us what it was like back then, when it came out.
That's always awesome.
Because we look back on it 30 years later.
Mm-hmm.
and it became a classic, but was it popular at the time? And how it was thought of when it first came out, like, I don't know what Metallica's initial reception was because I wasn't around yet.
I was too young to even. I was
Yeah.
like 7.
Yeah. Imagine being 7 years old and going to like a Metallica concert when they're underground.
You say that. I actually went to Metal Fest in 2016, where Testament was actually the headliner, and there was a 6-year-old kid. It had to be somebody like brought their kid to work because they couldn't like have anybody watch him.
Yeah.
But he was like, they had the upper balcony in the Palladium closed off because I don't think they wanted people diving off of there, and they knew us assholes would. Because it was like
I'd be one of them.
Because it's like a 20-foot drop down into the crowd.
Yeah.
And then there was just like this little kid just throwing his horns up and just banging his fucking head. I'm just like, yes.
That's awesome. Parents ain't done right.
Yeah, right. It's just like, we have claimed this one. He's ours.
Yeah. There's been to some smaller shows that I've been to where like it's either Battle of the Bands or like a local show, and it'll be like a relative of somebody who's performing that brings their kid, you know. But other than that, yeah, you don't see a whole lot of that, unfortunately. There should be more, just like introducing heavy metal in general to the younger ones, just so that they know what great music is, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too is people see like a lot more of like the mosh pit and like heavy drinking, drug use side of the bands.
Yeah.
And the side of the scene, and they try to keep their kids away from it for good reason, and I don't blame people for doing that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because there is a lot of that. There is. It's still to this day for sure.
Like it's part of the rock and roll culture. In general, is like you cannot go to a metal show and not see guys sneaking booze into the show and reeking of weed.
Hell, the last Battle of the Bands I went to snuck some booze in. I wasn't drinking inside; it was out in the parking lot. But hey, it's just kind of what you do.
Sneaking nips and stuff into metal shows is a long and proud tradition, and long may it continue.
Yep. Yep, long and proud tradition. Agreed.
And long may it continue, because drunken antics at metal shows are some of the funniest fucking things you'll ever see.
This is true, and I've seen a bunch. Thankfully, I've never been part of any, but I've seen quite my fair share.
Oh yeah.
Well, I almost always had to drive home from the show, so I wasn't about to get wrecked at the show.
Yeah, like especially a lot of the bigger festivals where people are camping out.
Mm-hmm.
Like you'll see the absolute dumbest shit ever.
Oh yeah.
Like somebody the funniest thing I ever saw, I was out in California with a buddy of mine, and we went to a festival out there, and this guy got to the door of his tent and went to bend down to open the zipper, and that action alone just lost his balance and just went face first right into his tent and just collapsed the whole freaking thing.
I've seen that before, actually.
It was just like, I feel so bad too. It's like, dude, you staggered your way 99% of the way there, and then you just literally fell at the last hurdle.
That was the great thing about my reenactment days, because we were using Viking style A-frames, and they're tall, 8-9 feet tall, with big, huge flaps for the doors on the front and back. And most of my crew was smart enough, you tie them so they'd stay shut in case the weather got shitty while you're out, but you tie them so they were loose. So if you had something like that happen, you just go right through the doors.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
you just kind of roll right through the door, and then you're on the floor.
Yeah, well, the problem was, depending on how you had your sleeping area set up inside, you might just be face planting right into the grass.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you might have some more issues, but at least you're not going to destroy the tent.
Exactly. Because that way it's an inconvenience for everyone else.
Yeah.
I don't think I've been to a festival where they do the camp out overnight and stuff, but the last one I went to, it was one of those Monster Energy shows. In fact, I was telling you about this one, Pope, where I went to go see Tool.
Yep.
And I don't even know what other bands played there. I think it was Five Finger Death Punch and a bunch of other mainstream American metal bands. But
back when Five Finger Death Punch wasn't horrible.
Yeah. But I remember it it's one of those ones where like you get drink tickets and you're not able to like bring your own drinks, but like more than half of the people I saw there were trash, and it's likely because they like had brought their own drinks and stuck them in. And I'm sitting here on the outside and looking at people stumbling over in the crowd, just laughing to myself. I'm like, man, a beer would be nice while I'm watching Tool.
Right. Well,
But
actually, the funny part is beer was probably the least of people's concerns. You probably had people that did
yeah,
like an eighth the shrooms and then went to go see Tool.
or worse, because yeah, where I was living at the time, like Northern California, you'd see a lot of meth or Molly too. So
Yeah.
like that was like a big thing at shows. Is like people would just be cracked out of their minds and drinking alcohol, and it's just like
I couldn't even imagine that, like going to go see like taking E and going to see a freaking metal band. Like,
yeah,
holy shit, dude.
That's more the stuff for raves for sure. But no, there were some people like that. But of course, you know, it being California, and you know, you have the legal smoke out there.
Yeah,
Tons of that for sure. But
same thing in Boston. Like every year, like even when I went to Boston Calling to see bands like Foo Fighters or somebody like Queens of the Stone Age, did one a couple of years ago. Like it's just everywhere because it's legal.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of funny because out here, the way it was, at least you know, back in the day, I don't know how it really is anymore as far as the scene goes, but you know, alcohol and weed were perfectly acceptable. Other stuff was kind of looked down upon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but it wasn't condemned. Usually, be somebody be like, "Oh yeah, that guy in that band's a bit of a cokehead or whatever."
Yeah.
Until
they're hardly alone in
somebody,
the scene.
unless the person got really, really bad about it, like just public problem, you know, issues being out in public or fucking up a gig or, you know, doing some bad PR. That's when you'd start seeing like even the fans be like, yeah, fuck this guy. But it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't really accepted. You know, people didn't really take it as like, oh, that's part of the rock and roll lifestyle. Most people were like, coke, heroin, no, keep that shit the fuck out of here.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, like 70s told the story of the time Keith Moon just straight up slumped over on his drum kit and was out in the middle of a show.
Yeah.
And they had to get somebody out of the crowd to come up and finish the set.
I mean, at the same time, too, like, you know, that even goes for alcohol, too. If anybody started getting a bad alcohol problem in, like, the scene of my neck of the woods, they'd be like, no, you're done. You're out. We're not losing the band. We're not losing these gigs. We're not doing this. Like, go clean up, and then we'll talk.
Yeah.
That's what happened with Metallica. They had to kick Dave out because he was even more of a drunken asshole than everybody else was, and that's impressive.
Yeah. Because it's like you said earlier, like drinking's just a part of the rock and roll culture. Like having like half a bottle or maybe 3/4 of a bottle would be normal, even though that's still like a shit ton to drink. It's more typical between you and the 3 other guys or 4 other guys in your band. You'd kill a bottle, and that'd be like 4 or 5 shots each or whatever.
Yeah, so everyone's buzzing a little bit. Nobody's
yeah. You know, the few shots you have before you go on stage, basically. But yeah, I can't imagine like fucking what those guys were doing back then. Like they probably each had their own handle that they were drinking. It's just insane stuff. But yeah,
and like Dave would try to fight other people in the band and like destroy equipment and shit like that. And then eventually they were just like, no, like you're gone.
Yeah. Didn't he, Dave Mustaine, didn't he like turn Christian recently or something like that?
Did. Yeah. He's actually finally cleaned up, which is good because he's been in and out of rehab like
a dozen times.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, oh yeah, I'm clean and sober now. 6 months later, back into rehab.
You know, I think that might also be more of a California band thing because you have bands like Anthrax. You never heard of Anthrax having issues like that.
Yeah, and I know most of them drink and probably did coke back in the day, but
probably smoke weed even to this day.
Oh, guaranteed. But you never really hear much of a problem with it.
Exodus was the same way. Never really heard anything about them. Testament, Slayer.
Yeah, Slayer you never really hear of in terms of the party animal bands, and then you have the LA bands.
But you did hear more recently though. You did hear about Kerry King and Hanneman's drinking.
Yeah. But it was never an issue to the point where it actually interfered with their performance, like on
or
stage
their
and
musical
stuff.
output, for an album or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah,
it was really just more interpersonal problems with the band that it caused.
But it just seems like all the bands that came out of California were the ones that had the public issues.
Yeah.
Look at all the hair bands.
Oh yeah, I mean Pantera was well known for it.
Yeah.
Well, Dimebag Darrell, I mean, he would have shots lined up on his amp that he would just take while he's playing, or like in between breaks. Like,
and the funny thing is, they went over the top with it because guys like Ronnie from Motorhead, the dude had a Jack and Coke sitting on his amp the entire show.
Yep.
And had a cigarette in his mouth most of the time, and it was just fine.
Yeah.
And you never really heard of any issues with Motorhead getting out of control or like having problems on stage because of it. They were just, they partied hard.
Yeah. Well, the same with Dimebag Darrell. Like, at least I'd never heard of like any issues where he would get into fights or be like an angry drunk or anything like that. He was just a party drunk, and dude could still play. Like, in fact, he had to be drunk to play, basically.
Which, given his style, you gotta kind of, if you're tight at all, you cannot play like him.
Yeah, true.
But no, man, like that. George Lynch from Dokken too. Like, he was well known as a drinker, and there's a famous story from the video they did for Dream Warriors, where in between takes they were all doing a line of coke off of Freddy Krueger's claws.
What?
Which should surprise absolutely no one, given Dokken's history.
Doesn't.
I hadn't heard that before. That's funny.
We did actually kind of sort of skip an older Metallica album.
Which one?
Garage Days.
Yep.
Because that came out in between Justice and Puppets and Justice.
That's true. It's one I didn't really do for this show because it wasn't really a studio album. It was really just a collection of demos from them.
No, it was a studio album. It was the one that was all covers.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, that's right.
It wasn't published. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and like they did a really good job of most of them. Like "Am I Evil" was a great cover. Although I do prefer the Diamond Head version. But no, they did some really interesting covers from that period.
Well, I mean, what's funny too is that when it comes to Metallica being covered, you usually don't hear much outside of really past the first 3 albums.
Yeah. I mean, you had Motorhead covering Whiplash.
Cannibal did No Remorse.
Yep.
And that's a great cover.
I'll have to give that a listen because that sounds interesting.
It's actually, in my opinion, it's honestly better than the original.
Ooh, okay.
Like, it's pure.
Free.
It's so good. They didn't speed it up. Well, they did a little bit, but it's not pure in your face Cannibal Corpse. But it's still got. They added to the groove, if that makes any sense. Like, their production style and their sound just added to the holy fuck. This is heavy.
They pretty much this like Cannibal style. Like, they've had great production since the start, and not really. The second and third albums productions were kind of not good. Butchered at Birth and Tomb of the Mutilated. Okay, yeah.
And then they came out with what the hell was The Bleeding. Once The Bleeding hit is when the production kicked back up.
Yeah. And then, like, Metallica's had a really big influence on just music in general. And like they were one of the first bands to really do a lot of music videos and stuff like that for their records. Like, for one of the real, like, more out there metal bands to really get into that. Because I think their first video was for what? Battery?
It was one.
Was it one?
Yeah, that was their first video.
And that was 88. So
even in like their 80s heyday, they were, even before they got real big, they were, on tours. They were on the first Monsters of Rock tour. They were opening. Yeah, they were opening. Them and Kingdom Come were the opening acts, I believe.
That might have been the first one in the U.S., but I think they did. The first Monsters of Rock was 1980. They weren't even a thing yet.
Well, it was the first one I remember.
Okay.
But they were opening for like the Scorpions and Van Halen.
Yeah. So like that was, they were opening for some of the big guys.
And then after that, was it around Puppets when they were touring, opening for Ozzy?
Yep.
So, I mean, they've always had, even in their days when they were an opening act, they weren't opening for some, mid-range band. They were opening for well-popular and well-established acts.
Yeah, and then in 89 for the Justice tour, they were touring with GNR as an opener.
Yeah.
Which led to the infamous Montreal riot.
Yeah, well, there's always one.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was the thing with touring with GNR is I think Metallica was on first.
Yeah, I believe so.
And James had the pyrotechnic accident.
Right.
And somehow in his drunken stupor, Axl Rose got it in his head that James did it on purpose to upstage him.
Yeah, let me light myself on fire. Literally.
Yeah. Not just light myself on fire, step into a 3,200 degree magnesium flare.
Yeah.
Just because that's what you do.
You don't want to do that on purpose.
You just don't want to do that on accident, even.
Yeah, he really fucked himself up bad.
Yeah.
Like, to the point where he had to be rushed to the hospital. And GNR could have come out and saved the show, because obviously they couldn't do the rest of the set. And they could have come out and saved the show. And they did. And then Axl just threw the fucking mic down and walked off. And that's when the riot started.
Well, again, it's also Montreal and riots. I mean, they riot when their hockey team loses. They riot when their hockey team wins.
This is
They're French light, so rioting's kind of part of their blood.
Yeah, it's true. Same thing in Boston, honestly. I mean, one of the worst riots we've had in modern history, before 2020, was when the Red Sox won the World Series in 2004.
I remember that.
Although, even we pale in comparison to Philly. Eagles fans are just the biggest douchebags in the freaking
I think Philly as a whole, as far as their sports fans go.
Yeah, they're just some of the worst sports fans of all time. I mean, there's a reason I think Eagle Stadium has its own jail. Like, under the bleachers, they have their own jail cells.
I believe it. Yep.
Because fans are just well known for being dickbags.
Getting into fights like probably every 15, 20 minutes.
And, Amber's used to that for being in the UK for soccer fans, because oof. But, I mean, in America, that's unheard of. Outside of, like, some of the Bruins Canadian series, like, you'll have fans fighting each other in the stands. But it's kind of rare, and it's usually because our teams are fighting on the ice, too.
Yep.
It's one of the reasons I love hockey.
Yep.
But, like, I mean, especially, like, for the time, too, like, it was such a bad look for the scene, because, like, bands like GNR and Metallica were kind of bridging the gap into mainstream rock and roll for the more extreme and, more metal bands. Of, like, hey, we're not all assholes, we don't, and stuff like that. And then that happened and made national news both in US and Canada. And it was just like, oh yay, we're the asshole again. Awesome. And I think that might have had an influence on the Black Album as well, in that they did want to go for that more mainstream sound, because they wanted to keep doing that sort of thing.
That would make sense. Yeah.
Well, I think too, if you think about it, when they saw the crowds GNR was pulling in, I'm sure they sat there, okay, some of these are some of our fans too, but we when we headline, we play some pretty big venues, but this is on a whole nother level. We want this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But their album sales were right up there with GNR. I mean, and Justice for All was extremely popular when it came out.
Yeah.
I think it was less critically acclaimed because Metallica fans are Metallica fans.
Well, metal's never gotten its due, in my opinion, when it comes to mainstream, or not that I want it to, or even the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Actually, speaking of that, I heard Priest has been inducted this year.
I heard about that. Yeah.
But that's like the first metal band that has been, I think.
Second. Sabbath was the first. They got in pretty
right, but damn well the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is not going to consider them metal. They're just going to consider them rock.
Yeah. And Trey's absolutely right. On paper, a Metallica and GNR show should be amazing. Unfortunately,
at that time, yeah.
Unfortunately, if you had tickets to that show, well, and that tour with Metallica was amazing. I've seen footage from I think it was the Seattle show,
and
they were just on fire. And yeah, I mean, Soul Assassin's got it. Like, they haven't allowed a metal band to play the halftime show yet. There's a lot of reasons for that. First of all, I think the promoters are afraid of metal bands because we have a habit of speaking our mind, which is also why those shows are not recorded live. They're all dubbed, and that's not something metal bands do.
Yeah.
So I don't think any band would agree to do it, and I don't think any of the promoters or the NFL would agree to have them on.
Because they'd be like, "You want to do what?"
Right?
Imagine they got tricked. Okay, because I'll leave this concept with another story. Did you know that the Insane Clown Posse was signed to Disney's record label?
Are you kidding?
For one out. Yes. And
really?
Yes, I don't remember what they were signed to their Buena Vista Records because they probably like, "Oh, rapping clowns, this will be great for kids," without ever listening to their prior stuff. And then when they realized what they had, they already put the album out. And I believe they recalled all of them. And then we're like, "No, we signed a contract, so we will reprint these. We're just not going to put the label name on it because we do not want to." Contract was done after that.
It's like, we don't want to be associated with anything.
Could you imagine some moron promoter who has no idea what black metal is and he's like, "Oh, what is that? A bunch of black guys playing heavy metal?" I've had people ask me if that's what black metal was before. I'm like,
wow.
No.
That's something that would happen nowadays.
But could you imagine that? And they get some band like 1349 or even old Gorgoroth where they had the stage set up with like the real animal heads on spikes and giant flaming upside down crosses and blood everywhere and just oh man, that would just
or like Marduk.
And they don't really do a stage show though.
Yeah, they do to an extent, but that with them it's more the lyrics of just like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna sign these guys to Buena Vista Records," and they just sign them up, and then they see their stage show. It's like, "This is gonna be our new one, Fist Fucking God's Planet."
Yeah. Could you just imagine something like that happening on the Super Bowl? Just how insanely funny it would be just to see millions of Americans horrified.
Just everyone else is clutching their pearls, and all the metal fans are just laughing our balls off.
Especially like a band like that actually does have that crazy, insane, like almost satanic ritual stage show.
Yeah.
People would have no idea how to process that.
It makes Ozzy look tame with some of the stuff that he did.
And I still love one of my favorite stories with Ozzy is like there was some Christian group that was protesting one of his shows, and he showed up and started holding a sign and marching with them.
That's Ozzy.
But that's Ozzy would do funny stuff like that. But then we have like the retards and Antifa. Look at who they decide they're going to try to target in the metal scene. It's like,
Marduk.
Not smart.
Yeah,
Marduk, who's been around since like 91.
Not to mention in the black metal scene, like, but they're Nazis. It's like, sweetheart, this is the wrong genre of metal to be doing that in.
Yeah.
It's like some of them are. We all know who they are, and we don't go to their shows either.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Man.
But it's like you're going to target Marduk, who's been around for like almost, at this point, going on like 2 decades. But at the time, they've been around for over a decade. You have all their okay, so point out in the first 5 albums where they talk about anything involving war, like they do nowadays. They didn't, because they were just pure black metal at the time, and it was pretty much evil and Satan and etc.
Yeah, and then they just kind of ran into the war theme that a lot. I mean, even Bathory had a lot of that in their stuff, and that kind of worked its way into black metal over the years, in that. They kind of mixed in a lot of the dark imagery from like World War II and that era with their sound, and it fits very well.
Yes.
I mean, I like a lot of like Panzer Division Marduk is my favorite record from them.
I get so many looks when people hear songs from that album coming out of my window.
Well, some of them are kind of question marks. I'm like,
I remember somebody was sitting there and they were like, "Oh, I really don't like this." I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, it's fucking Marduk. I get it. I'm like, well, why not? Well, the drums sound like machine guns. And
like, that's the point.
Some of the parts of the solo make it sound like bombs are falling. I'm like,
that's the point.
That's what they we're trying to do.
Like, yeah. Oh man, cracks me up.
Yeah, and I do hate like a lot of the more modern, like this cancel culture bullshit when it comes to the metal scene. And you'll have bands come out and try to cancel each other now. It's like, dude, what the fuck?
Lame.
Yeah.
It's like that's always been what metal is about. Is we don't give a fuck what the other band does. We don't give a fuck what you're here for. We're here to rock and roll and let's fucking do this thing.
I mean, metal's always been kind of a fuck you to society.
Yeah, it's like we're going to say what we want, we're going to do what we want. If you have a problem with it, we can have a fucking problem.
Then you have the more extreme side of things, like with black metal, which is just a fuck you to everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They took the punk attitude and took it one more step.
Yep.
To fuck you, fuck society, fuck God. Like, uh-oh.
Wasn't there a story about like one of the original like black metal bands or like guys that tried to start it was like into some like actually like crazy satanic stuff and was like convicted for murder or something like that?
Yeah, there's a few of those things.
There's
a few of those stories. Mayhem,
Yeah.
The Mayhem Burzum thing,
Mayhem
Bard
actually,
Faust from Emperor.
Mayhem actually burning down a church.
Same with Emperor and Burzum, and
Bard just straight up being a white nationalist piece of crap.
Yeah.
That's a more recent development, though. I think that's more of a clout chasing thing where he thinks that's where the future is. I don't know how because he's a lunatic, but you know,
well, he's always been a lunatic. He's a prime example of. If you like black metal or even underground metal as a whole, in some cases, you really have to separate the art from the artist, especially if the stupidity and the lunacy doesn't carry over into the lyrical content.
Yeah.
And for as much of a lunatic as Varg is, none of that lunacy ever carried over into Burzum.
Yeah,
at least not until more recently.
Yeah, I think he's fine when he has other people kind of holding his leash and being like, no.
Well, yeah, because on one of the albums he had Samoth from Emperor playing bass for him.
Yeah, and I think he was a very calming influence.
It makes one wonder, though.
Yeah, when he's a calming influence.
Well, because Samoth was one of those guys that was arrested and was in jail for a couple of years for arson.
Yeah, and like I think that side of the scene, I think, is what gives the rest of us kind of a bad reputation. And you will see a lot of that. And we all know it exists, like, but we know like not that's like the 1% of the scene that gives everybody else a bad name. Just like at all of these protests, like I was actually at that protest in Richmond in January 2020, and like the only people there that were causing problems were Antifa, and they all got arrested. And like the news was all focusing on like the white nationalists who were all there. There was like 20 of them,
and they were avoided.
Yeah, and like they were like, "Oh yeah, we're here to protest too," and we straight up were like, "Not with us, you're not. Get the fuck out of here."
Yeah.
And and unfortunately, those guys are the ones everyone focuses in on because the behavior is the bad shit. And just like with conservatives now, the media has always been out to paint the metalheads as a bunch of white nationalist, freaking racist, party animals. And there is an element of that in the more extreme sides of the genre, but they focus in on that because it is so extreme and it's almost caricature of.
It's like that with anything. There's always that little minority of extreme people that kind of ruin it, and like you said, everyone focuses on that because they're the loudest. They are the extreme. So
not only they're the loudest, they're the ones that fit the narrative that they're trying to sell.
Yeah.
And they want to shine a spotlight on it because, like, see, we were right about these people the whole time. Here they are.
Yeah, exactly.
And what, like, the rest of us are just like, yeah, we know about them. We avoid them like the plague too. And Soul Assassins, right, on this one too, where that's like the awesome thing about the scene is it's something you don't see in a lot of other genres where if shit happens at a show. we're helping people out. Like, if somebody goes down in a pit, you get them up right away. If you see someone get hurt, we get them help. Like, we'll try to help them out as much as we can. And, if somebody's really being a dick, we'll get security over there to freaking drag them off. Usually after we've had our way with them.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like Imperitus has said before. It's like, yo, give me like 5 minutes with this dude, and then we'll hand him over.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've seen that happen at shows. Like some guy was just being a dick in the pit, and he ended up like full on forearm smashing this girl in the nose. And me and my buddies, and even other people we didn't know, all kind of looked at each other and were like, "Yep." We just descended on him, and just that poor dude was. And the one of the guys that was, we all looked at each other. One guy went and go get one of the bouncers, and he even said he told the bouncer like, "Yeah, come over in about 5 minutes. You got somebody you're going to need to escort out of here." And the bouncer, he was familiar with a lot of people in the scene because it was a venue that had a lot of shows, and he's like, "All right," and he came and he literally had to drag the poor bastard out of the venue.
Yeah. Well, serves him right. You go and hit a girl in the pit. And
not like that, anyways. You don't hit anybody. Like this guy was literally throwing elbows.
Yeah, like if you get bounced or something and your elbow goes up and it smashes somebody, it's one thing. Like everyone kind of understands. Like it's a mosh pit. It's a mosh pit. Shit happens. But when you're like consistently throwing elbows into people and like intentionally smashing into the little ones, like because I've seen that, like guys intentionally running over like small girls and shit. I don't know why it happens. I don't know who would be that kind of guy, but it happens, and that's when you attract attention from guys like us who are just like, nope.
Exactly. I haven't run into any situations like that. Like a couple of people. Yeah, exactly. More than anything, I've run into generally the nicest people, kind of redundant to say that, but the nicest people in the metal community, always welcoming, always helping you out. Yeah. I mean, like the one time I ran into somebody who was being a dick, like throwing elbows, and he just like quit because a bunch of other people kind of like started elbowing him back. And yeah, nothing like hitting girls or like small people.
Yeah,
like a huge pit. But
like if somebody starts throwing elbows, usually guys will start throwing elbows back into him.
Exactly.
And that's your warning of, dude, you're being a dick. Stop.
Yep.
And
exactly.
And then the next step is me coming across the pit and just freaking giving you a haymaker right across the bottom. I've literally broken my hand on someone, and it was well worth it.
I've skull bashed someone before, but that was totally intentional and friendly, even though it took me by surprise. I think I told you about it. I was in high school. I was at a Conducting from the Grave concert, and in the mosh pit, got slungshot at somebody who was like slungshot back into me. Like two guys grabbing me, like one on each side, and I'm like, "What the heck? Why are you guys grabbing me?" And I look across the pit, and the same thing with another dude. And we just got slungshot into each other, just being thrown in.
Soul Assassin, I've seen.
Oh yeah,
I've seen Slipshot live, and I've seen that happen in real time, and it's hilarious. Basically, like, nope, that guy needs to fucking go. And and like, I think he's like kind of talking to security, but the crowd is the one who reacts way before they can.
Well, because you're right there, and it's generally like the guys in the band that call that shit out. Like, you're talking to the crowd, like, "Hey, get that guy. He's not doing proper." Basically,
yeah, like this guy's
like an asshole.
This guy's fucking up. He's been warned. Get him out of here.
Yep.
And Trey said it too. Like, I've never gotten this attitude. Like if you're a certain color or from a certain area, you have to listen to a certain type of music. It's like, nah. I know black metal heads that are like some of the most extreme guys out there.
Yeah.
One of the. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with what Pope said. Like, I know, quite a few black metal heads, and they're, some of the coolest guys out in the scene, and just some of the most brutal when it comes to their tastes.
Oh yeah, like I know it's really weird given the subject matter, but I know a black dude who's like really into NSBM.
That's kind of insane.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know what that is National Socialist black metal. It's exactly what you think it is.
And 99% of those bands aren't even musically talented.
No, most of it's trash. And
trash. That's a bit of a conundrum.
but that is a thing. We know who those bands are. We don't go to their shows, and they're not welcome at ours.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
They're welcome as long as they behave, but they never do.
Is it? I'm thinking of a different band now. I thought it was Trivium I was thinking of, but there's a couple of bands out there that have black vocalists in metal bands that are just like absolutely
Kill
phenomenal.
Switch Engage.
Yeah, Killswitch was one. There's another band I listen to, Oceano. They're like a kind of like it's one of those like really heavy I wouldn't call them slam metal, but they're in that kind of category subgenre of death metal that's just like all screaming vocals and just heavy breakdowns constantly, but the vocalist is brutal and he's black too. And they sound amazing.
Seven Dust.
Suffocation.
Seven Dust, yeah.
The guitarist and drummer for Suffocation were both black.
Mm,
And that's a brutal as fuck death metal.
And even on the mainstream side, in Living Color.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this is a good question from Brightest Day.
Non-metal artists who are metal as fuck.
I would say Dave Grohl, because he listens to a lot of it and he has the attitude of just, hey, we're here to rock and roll.
Tosin Abasi from Animals as Leaders, because it's like technically a metal band, but they're mainly jazz and progressive.
Yeah,
that's where Tosin Abasi gets a lot of his influence from, is classical and jazz. But yeah,
I would say Sammy Hagar from Van Halen too.
There you go.
Although technically he has been in metal bands with Montrose and some of that stuff. But yeah, I don't know a lot of other ones that would kind of qualify. Like, we're kind of a genre unto our own, and people who are like that kind of play that music.
I guess it depends. Like, sorry.
No, go ahead.
It kind of depends. Like, for me, like the first thing that come to my head is probably like weird, but bands like maybe Joy Division, just because you have that kind of like lyrically, I don't know. Maybe that's a weird answer, but those kind of like bands like Bauhaus, they don't sound metal. They don't sound metally, but I don't know. They have a certain vibe.
I think Brightest Day has three great ones right here.
Yeah.
Although Public Enemy did do a song with Anthrax, so
I mean, the couple that I would say would be Killing Joke and Porcupine Tree.
Yeah. Johnny Cash, absolutely.
Yes.
Like he definitely had the attitude.
Yep.
NWA, absolutely. They were in the same position we were in the 80s, where like especially the more out there rappers were just like, they were shat on, they were looked at as freaking deviants, like nobody would sign them, like because people were uncomfortable with the shit they were doing and shit they were talking about. And back then it was when I actually dig rap, because they had a legitimate point to make and they were making it. Of just for the first time, people were hearing how it was in the hood and like how things worked in that world. And it's something that most people like out in my area would never see, because we don't go to those neighborhoods. We know better than to go to those neighborhoods. And actually, Cash had Hurt covered by Nine Inch Nails, and it was actually pretty okay.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Even though I'm not a big fan of Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah.
Same.
Like I like a couple of their songs, and musically it's kind of interesting. Trent Reznor has a very interesting take on music, but overall I'm kind of not a huge fan of where Nine Inch Nails goes.
Yeah, I like a few of their songs. I haven't listened to them a whole bunch, except for like the main singles you hear on the radio and stuff. But yeah.
Same thing with Rage Against the Machine. I've just never been a fan. I don't like their politics, and I don't like their music. Although Tom Morello is a great guitarist, I'll give him that.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of one of those, like, it's just never been my thing. It's a little too rap rock for me.
For me, like, I appreciate the I guess work ethic and like talent that Tom Morello has with his guitar playing, but for me, I've always loved like just straight metal. You put on a bunch of distortion, play through your amp, and that's it. you put on some effects, like it'll be something like a little bit of reverb and delay, but like he does go pretty out there with his effects, like wah pedals and fuzz and everything. I'm like, a little too much for me. I used to like him a lot more way back in the day, but not as much.
Limp
Bizkit for copies.
Pretty much.
That's funny.
Well, we've been going for like 2.5 hours, and I know it's late for Amber, and I gotta go do some stuff. So I think we're gonna end it here. It's been a great freaking conversation.
Oh yeah.
And I think we're gonna do a lot more of these, obviously. And chat, get used to seeing these faces around, because I think we're gonna be doing a lot more shows with these guys. Because it's just great, and you all have been amazing as always. And like I said to Sentinel and Darius, I want to get you and Trey and all you guys on the show at one point and talk some of your favorite music, because that's what I love, is especially if it's a band I'm not familiar with, having to listen to new stuff and then see what I think about it. Because this is how I find out about new bands, and like I cannot tell you how many times I've never heard of a band that somebody's mentioned, throwing on one of their albums, and then a week later I own it all. Like I just go on an iTunes binge and just buy half of their material. But no, give you guys a chance to plug your stuff and call it there. So Imperitus, what do you got coming up, buddy?
Just gonna be working on a couple more album reviews. Other than that, nothing really big coming up, not at least for the rest of this month. Something coming up the end of June. Will be on Thursday Night Throwdown.
Okay.
And then we got our thing.
Oh, that's right. I'm going to be on that show too.
Yeah, and then we got our thing coming up with Nick, which I'll let Nick say actually what it is on July 17th.
That's going to be a great fucking project.
It's going to be a long day, but a fun day.
Oh yeah, that's going to be a freaking absolute monstrosity of a stream. But sorry, you said you. Oh, sorry. Actually, removed you. Technical difficulties, everyone. I swear, it's not the operator.
You're good. No, actually, so I've been showing up on like friends' Twitch streams, so I'm gonna be getting started on doing my own. I already have a channel, but like going live probably like within a week, playing some games like Spec Ops: The Line, probably a couple of horror games. Like I want to play Amnesia, so I'll probably get that going too. But coming up and within a month, I'm gonna start doing some like music and movie reviews on my YouTube channel under the same name, which will be some old classics I like. So like some Clint Eastwood stuff. Everybody loves Clint Eastwood stuff. And then I'll be getting into some old kung fu and samurai films as well. So if you guys are at all interested in that, that'll be something that'll be coming up within the next month here.
We know when you start getting into the kung fu movies, it's another area I
will definitely
knowledge.
Hell yeah. Yeah, no, I love that stuff. One of my favorite like kung fu comedy films, like everybody knows about Kung Pao, Enter the Fist, but if you haven't seen it, Kung Fu Soccer is
hilarious.
Excellent. It is hilarious. Yeah, I'll probably end up covering that. But yeah, no, I've got a whole list of films I'll be going through as far as like the samurai stuff goes, and like how that kind of like influenced like Western films and vice versa, and especially films like Kill Bill have been inspired by Japanese samurai films. So that'll be something coming up pretty soon.
All right, and Amber, what do you got going
on? Yeah, so I do have a YouTube channel. Mostly it's just I put my own music on there and poetry on there as well. I have done a few album reviews, but I do want to sort of like go back into doing that at some point. Other than that, my music is on Bandcamp. That's where like most of my music is, and I'm also on Twitch as well, which is nothing related to music at all. I just play games terribly and cause chaos, but it's a lot of fun. So do check me out on there if you like to use Twitch. Other than that, oh yeah, I'm playing LA Noire at the moment on Twitch, which has been super fun. Other than that, that's it really.
All right. And you should absolutely check out her LA Noir streams. They're hilarious.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun.
The shenanigans that ensue are absolutely great.
So yeah, go and check me out over there if you so desire. But yeah, thank you to Pope for having me on the stream. I really appreciate it.
No, absolutely. And as for me, like I said, you guys have been amazing as always. Both the chat, where we always get some good comments and some really knowledgeable people in the chat, and I appreciate that quite a bit. And then to the panel, I loved having you all on. We'll definitely have to do this again in the near future. I absolutely loved having this conversation, and there's a lot more stuff out there we need to talk about. So I don't think this format's going away anytime soon. And as for me, I do one of these almost every week, usually on Saturday or Sunday, depending on what day works better for my guests. If you guys have an album or a topic you want me to talk about, leave it down in the comments of the video, or DM it to me on Gilded or whatever. And if I really like it, I'll run with it, and I'll probably want to have you on the show to talk about it. That's kind of how this stream came about. So let me know. And other than that, you can catch me on Twitch very irregularly. So if you follow me over there, and I go live at random points just to play BattleTech, or I do have Dune Spice Wars that I'm kind of enjoying. I haven't streamed it yet because I'm having some frame rate issues with it. I think it's just the early access, but we'll see if I ever get that working right. And I'll stream that over on Twitch because it's a better platform for gaming. And I've linked both mine and Amber's Twitch channels in the bottom, her Bandcamp as well. So make sure to go check that out. Unlike usual, I didn't link the video or the albums in the description because there's 5 of them, and you guys have probably all heard these records already. And if not, you know exactly where to find them. They're not hard to find. So yeah, I think that's going to do it for us. So all that being said, take care, stay healthy, stay safe. I love you all, and I'll catch you next time.